Chapter 2604. The first 4 stages. Ladies and gentlemen, that's an accurate guess. If this transmigration sword formation is really that valuable, it won't be presented in this auction. However, this sword formation truly originated from Sword Lord Tong Xan. The Golden Chief's huge voice resonated in the auction house. The reason it appears in this auction is due to its incompleteness. Sword Lord Tong Xan was extraordinarily talented. After he created the transmigration sword formation, he gradually perfected it. It kept improving following the continuous progress in his understanding of transmigration law and sword principles. The transmigration sword formation started with only 1 stage, but ended with a total of 12 stages. In other words, the transmigration sword formation has a total of sword formation 12 stages and are separated into the first 4, middle 4, and final 4 stages. Among them, the first 4 stages were extremely powerful but also widely circulated. The middle stages are overpowering, but there were fewer of them being circulated. As for the final 4 stages, they are the real assets that Sword Lord Tong Xan relied on to roam the ancient god domain. The sword formation's final 4 stages alone were enough to cause a crazy competition among undying saints to obtain them. The middle 4 stages were also drooled over by countless heavenly ultimate gods, grand ultimate gods, and undying saints. However, what we have here today are only the first 4 stages of the transmigration sword formation. These 4 stages of the sword formation are the most widely circulated, hence its value is a lot less ridiculous compared to the remaining stages. The many experts in the auction finally understood the situation upon hearing the Golden Chief's explanation. So it's only the first 4 stages. No wonder it appears in this auction. According to the Golden Chief, Sword Lord Tong Xin's transmigration sword formation is absolutely terrifying, but only the middle 4 and final 4 stages are the terrifying ones. As for these first 4 stages, they don't seem as powerful. Even so, they're created by Sword Lord Tong Xan after all. Even if it's the first 4 stages, I'm afraid it's still out of the ordinary. Unfortunately, although I'm skilled in sword principles, I've never studied transmigration law. Otherwise, I will try to purchase this sword formation. Many experts began to quietly discuss among themselves. On the display stage, the Golden Chief spoke once again. Honorable guests, I've been very clear with my explanation. I'll leave it up to you in deciding on the value of these transmigration sword formation's first 4 stages. We will now begin the auction with the starting bid of 10 million primordial stones. 10 million? There was a wave of exclamation in the venue, but it died down rather quickly. Even though it was just the transmigration sword formation's first 4 stages, its value was still extraordinary. There were people immediately making their bids. In the individual room on the 2nd floor, Jianghu stood there with his eyes staring firmly at the jade slip on the display shelf. Transmigration sword formation. The main criteria being skilled in sword principles, and the secondary criteria are proficiency in transmigration law. This transmigration sword formation turns out to be very fitting to me since I'm highly skilled in sword principles and also studied transmigration law. Jianghu squinted. He was no stranger to sword formations. In his past life, he had more than one encounter with sword formations, so he understood its power. Hongjun Golden Sword Technique, for example, was similar to a sword formation. In his past life, it was one of his main techniques. He would usually activate the Hongjun Golden Sword to suppress his opponent while fighting his opponent in close-range combat. It gave his opponents extreme pressure when both were combined. The transmigration sword formation was the almost invincible Sword Lord Tong Xin's creation, which at the Undying Saint realm with its power naturally not to be underestimated. If he could obtain such a sword formation, it would perhaps be a great help to him. I'm concurrently studying both space-time and transmigration laws. However, I can't simply utilize both laws simultaneously when I'm fighting experts. I could either activate space-time law and use space-time sword technique, or activate transmigration law and use transmigration sword technique. I could only activate one after another, but I can't perfectly join them together. But if I can handle this sword formation, then I can use transmigration law to drive the sword formation against my opponent while activating space-time law to fight him head-to-head. The power of both laws will then fuse perfectly and be unleashed simultaneously. Furthermore, the sword formation is for range attacks and my sword technique is for melee combat. Both can then come together perfectly. Furthermore, he'll be able to take a brief rest from advancing transmigration sword skills and pour all my efforts into improving the space-time sword skills with this sword formation. I won't need to use the transmigration sword formation anymore once I've deepened my sword principle understanding, and at that time I'll just resume advancing my transmigration sword skills. Jian Wushuang held his hands together tightly as his eyes shone with excitement. He repeatedly contemplated and consistently felt the transmigration sword formation was very befitting for him. Although it would not immensely help to upgrade his overall battle strength, it could help to perfect his attack methods, making them more harmonious. That was a great advantage. Let's do it. Jian Wushuang made his decision. 20 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang projected his voice from the room, which resonated throughout the entire auction house. As soon as the bid was made, the auction house became quiet for a short while. After that, a hoarse voice spoke from another room on the second floor. 25 million primordial stones. They'll be taking this sword formation. 30 million. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate to make his bid. A short, dark, hunching old man frowned in the individual room the hoarse voice came from. He looked over at Jian Wushuang's room with a cold light shining through his eyes. Unfortunately, although he knew which room the voice came from, he would not know who was in the room. 25 million primordial stones. Chan Tua hopes you can save me some face, said the ugly old man once again. Chan Tua? It's him. So, it's that old toad. No wonder he's interested in the transmigration sword formation, but I'm curious about his competitor's identity. That old toad is a peak Earth ultimate god and has countless techniques. Not one to be trifled with. Many Earth ultimate gods in the second floor rooms were secretly exclaiming. All of them had heard of Chan Tua's reputation. He was very strong in both abilities and techniques and at the same time was an eccentric lone wolf. However, it was exactly a lone wolf like him who only played by his own rule that was most terrifying. At least, not many would dare cross him among the many Earth ultimate gods on the second floor. The reason he revealed his identity was to ask Jian Wushuang to give him some face. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang had no clue who Chan Tua was and would not have cared even if he knew. 40 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang had spoken once again. Chapter 2605, Golden Rock, damn you. Chan Tua, the ugly old man, cursed under his breath while staring toward Jian Wushuang's room with thick killing intent. However, he finally withdrew his killing intent, sighed lightly, and no longer followed up with another bid. The Earth ultimate gods in the individual rooms were disbelieved upon seeing Chan Tua's not reacting for a while. Looks like that old toad has given up. 40 million primordial stones? Even an ordinary heavenly ultimate god will have to liquidate all of his possessions to come up with that sum. The old toad does have some skills, but I'm afraid he won't be able to pay that much. I wonder who's the man in that room that even refuses to give Chan Tua face. He's probably someone important since he can come up with 40 million primordial stones just like that. The Transmigration Sword Formations auction ended amid praises and exclamations. Finally, the Transmigration Sword Formation's first 4 stages were purchased by Jian Wushuang with a bid of 40 million primordial stones. Jian Wushuang sighed in relief upon the successful purchase. 40 million primordial stones was the limit for him. If the bid went up further, he would perhaps have to give up. It was not from him being unable to afford more primordial stones, but because there were other items that he wanted to purchase later in the auction. Although the Transmigration Sword Formation was powerful, the value of even all 12 stages was not a 1,000th of the stately painting which Jian Wushuang wanted to truly obtain. As for the Transmigration Sword Formation, it was only something he discovered by chance and thought would be useful, hence his bid and purchase. This Chan Tua who wanted to compete with me over the Transmigration Sword Formation. Although I've never heard of him, for someone who so daringly reveals their identity and asks me to give them some face must be pretty famous and most probably powerful too. I'm afraid I've offended him by not giving him any face, but the individual rooms in the auction are all under the protection of restrictive shields, so he won't know who I am. Even if he wanted to take revenge, he won't be able to find me. Jian Wushuang chuckled. The next valuable item was very soon placed on the display stage. Meanwhile, a bald man sat lazily in an individual room on the 3rd floor. The bald man was clad in a golden robe just like the golden chief downstairs hosting the auction on the display stage. He was also a golden chief at the star-picking pavilion. 40 million primordial stones for the sword formation's first 4 stages? The bald man looked downward at the room where Jian Wushuang was in and asked, "Not many earthly ultimate gods will be able to afford 40 million primordial stones. Who's in that room?" 4 black chiefs were standing respectfully before the bald man. One of them immediately answered, "In reply to your question, Your Excellency. The man in the room is the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord, Jian Yi." Jian Yi? The bald man raised his eyebrows. He's the one who killed San Shouwang and took over the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord position? Based on what I know, although San Shouwang was the Territorial Lord, the wealth he accumulated through the ages was completely spent on the Divine Destruction Beast. This man just became the Territorial Lord. Where did he find those primordial stones? Your Excellency, this Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord has also brought a few treasures to be auctioned in the Star-Picking Pavilion. Among them was a Heavenly Treasure defensive armor and the Heavenly Treasure offensive Divine Soul weapon, which was also the first treasure that we sold in the auction, said the Black Chief. What? The bald man's eyes were shining with a strange light from being surprised. He's only an ordinary territorial lord at the earthly ultimate god realm, yet he could obtain an offensive divine soul weapon and a defensive armor at the heavenly treasure rank. Looks like I really should request to meet him once. San Shouwang was someone who owed me a total of 6 million primordial stones after all, and said he will find ways to annihilate one of the large clans in the Northern Darkstar territory as soon as possible before returning the primordial stones to me. Interest included. Who will have thought he'd die in Jenny's hands? Even though he died, I can't just let go of my 6 million primordial stones. The bald man mumbled. Suddenly, the door opened as a black chief hurriedly came in. What's with the hastiness? The bald man frowned and scolded. Your Excellency, the manager needs you to rush over as soon as you can. That gentleman is here, said the black chief fearfully. What gentleman? Oh. The bald man was puzzled. As Senior Meng, said the black chief nervously. The bald man stood in shock. In the next moment he rushed out at full speed. The auction continued. Treasures after treasures were being displayed, with the many experts in the auction also fiercely trying to outbid each other. Half a day had passed in the blink of an eye. In that time, Jian Wushuang's last treasure, the Heavenly Treasure defensive armor, was also sold. The final bid was at 18 million primordial stones, slightly less than Jian Wushuang's initial prediction of 20 million primordial stones. The main reason was the too many very expensive treasures being sold in the auction. There were already 2 Heavenly Treasure armors among defensive armors so far in the auction, and Jian Wushuang's armor was the third. Naturally, it was very difficult to sell it at a satisfactory price. Honorable guests, the next item we're about to present to you is rather unique. Behold. The Golden Chief waved his hand as a baby fist-sized golden rock appeared on the display stage. Everyone in the room immediately looked over and was puzzled as soon as they saw it. They could not identify the golden rock. They were not even sure if the golden rock was some special kind of crystal or merely an ordinary rock. The golden rock projected no special energy from its surface either. It was too ordinary. It was almost no different than normal rocks. The Golden Chief directly spoke. Honorable guests, this golden rock is very unique. I'm assuming that nobody in the room could identify it, but you aren't the only one. Even we from the Star-Picking Pavilion can't find out what exactly the material is. We don't know what's so special about it, and neither can we even be sure if it's really a treasure. Even the Star-Picking Pavilion isn't sure? Everyone in the auction was shocked. Why will the Star-Picking Pavilion put it up in the auction when they can't even ascertain if it's a valuable item? Honorable guests, please let me explain. Indeed, the Star-Picking Pavilion can't identify it, but the golden rock itself has an extraordinary origin. The Golden Chief began to narrate his story. Chapter 2606. Spacetime Fluctuation. Long time ago, a chamber left behind by an undying saint was discovered in a holy domain. The chamber contained large amounts of treasures left behind by the undying saint and caused a wave of battle, with many experts dying over the fight for those treasures. There were experts from Star-Picking Pavilion who participated in the battle and obtained quite a harvest, bringing back many treasures. This golden rock is one of the treasures we obtained from that chamber. The Golden Chief paused a little and scanned the crowd. Just imagine, if it's not a rare treasure, why will it appear in an undying saint's chamber, and why will he keep it with him the whole time? Besides, we had experts who tried destroying the golden rock, but there was no way to do so as it's tough. That further proved it's truly a treasure that only nobody could identify and discover its value yet. The experts were nodding upon hearing the Golden Chief's words. Truly, anything appearing in an undying saint's chamber should not be ordinary. Furthermore, it was only logical that it was not a normal rock, since the golden rock was so tough. Sir, your words do make sense. Perhaps the golden rock is really a valuable item. However, we don't know its usage, so even if one of us obtained it, it won't be useful after all. A voice had spoken from an individual room on the second floor. The Golden Chief immediately laughed. That's truly the case, hence I have no confidence whether this item would be purchased. However, I will temporarily retract the restrictive shield around the display stage when the bidding starts, so that all of you can channel your soul power and investigate this golden rock. There are many experts here. Perhaps one of you could identify the golden rock. Besides, this golden rock starting price isn't that high. It's only 5 million primordial stones. As soon as the Golden Chief finished his speech, he retracted the restrictive shield around him. Beams of soul power immediately began to push toward the golden rock. The experts in the auction, including those in the individual rooms of the second and third floors, paid their full attention to the golden rock. Jianghu was also channeling his soul power toward it. A long while later, everyone began retracting their soul power. However, the experts in the auction felt perplexed after their investigation. None of them could find out anything about the golden rock, and everyone could only conclude that it was only an ordinary rock. Even the experts in the individual rooms of the second and third floors had the same opinion. This golden rock seems to be quite ordinary. In the Dongfang clan's room, the beautiful lattice expression was cold. She looked down and said, "I'm afraid Star-Picking Pavilion has obtained this golden rock for ages, but they could not find out anything about it, so they took it out for auction. If they can't tell what it is, this golden rock won't be of any use to me." The beautiful lady had no intention whatsoever to bid for it. Although the Dongfang clan was extremely wealthy, they would only spend their energy on things that were useful to them. Therefore, that golden rock was useless to them. It's just a rock that came from an undying saint's chamber, and yet the starting price is 5 million primordial stones. Star-Picking Pavilion truly has a big appetite, scoffed the young palace master of Nanwu Palace. He could not even be bothered to even look at the golden rock. Moreover, there were only a few items that had caught his attention for more than 2 seconds ever since the auction began. Even those were not sufficient to motivate him in placing a bid. Not only the two of them, but almost every expert in the auction house also did not show any interest in the golden rock. Due to that, nobody made a bid for a long time after the auction of the golden rock started. Silence filled the auction. After a long moment, a voice had spoken. "I'll pay the 5 million primordial stones since nobody is interested. I will investigate it in detail when I bring it home. Perhaps I'll find out the secrets within." Everybody followed the source of the voice and looked up at an individual room on the second floor. The person in that room must be the one who bought the transmigration sword formation? I wonder who's in that room. He spent 40 million primordial stones on the transmigration sword formation's first 4 stages, and now he's buying this unidentified rock with 5 million primordial stones. 5 million primordial stones is no small number after all. He may have found out something about it since he's willing to pay so much for this golden rock. Many cultivators on the first floor began to discuss among themselves. In his room, Jianghu spoke with a casual, emotionless voice. However, his eyes were staring at the golden rock on the display stage sharply at that moment. Jianghu had extended his soul power as well when the Golden Chief took down the restrictive shield a moment ago and allowed everyone to penetrate the golden rock with their soul power. After his soul power shrouded the golden rock, he could sense an extremely hidden space-time fluctuation. The little bit of space-time fluctuation was so hidden that ordinary cultivators, even heavenly ultimate gods, grand ultimate gods, and undying saints, could not easily discover it. The reason Jianghu could discover it was not only because he had a very deep understanding of space-time law. The most crucial reason was that he had a great affinity with space-time energy. In other words, he had an extraordinary talent in understanding space-time law. He was a super genius in understanding space-time law, a super demon. It was due to that, he could barely feel the slight space-time fluctuation and was willing to spend 5 million primordial stones to purchase the golden rock. This golden rock is probably a treasure that has something to do with space-time law, or maybe contains something that involves space-time law. Although I can't figure out its antecedents and what it contains, it only costs 5 million. It's a good gamble to bring it home and properly study it. I'm in luck if it ended up containing some big opportunity that involves space-time. Even if there aren't any big opportunities and is only an ordinary treasure that has something to do with space-time, my loss is still minimal, though Jianghu to himself. The golden rock was too unique with nobody knowing about its origin. Even though Jianghu could barely sense some space-time fluctuation, spending 5 million primordial stones was still a huge risk for him. As for the others, they could not even sense the little bit of space-time fluctuation. Naturally, they would not compete with him over it. Without a doubt, no one was willing to make a bid except for Jianghu. In the end, the golden rock was sold for 5 million primordial stones and became Jianghu's possession. Chapter 2607, Stars of the Auction. In the individual room, "Sir, here are the first 4 stages of the transmigration sword formation, the golden rock, and also the primordial stones for the items you've sold after deducting our commission. It's all here, please check carefully." A black chief passed an interspatial ring to Jian Wushuang. After Jian Wushuang took the ring, he took a quick look and nodded slightly. The items he had sold in Star Picking Pavilion, including the spiritual stone staff, had made him a total of 12,120,000 primordial stones. There were close to 75 million primordial stones in the interspatial ring after deducting the 45 million primordial stones for the 4 stages of sword formation, the golden rock, and commissions paid. He was also in possession of a divine elixir pill and various cultivation materials that amounted to 25 million primordial stones. In other words, Jian Wushuang had exactly 100 million primordial stones. "I'm hoping that the 100 million primordial stones is enough to help me purchase the stately painting," mumbled Jian Wushuang to himself. The auction continued. However, the items that were displayed thereafter did not motivate Jian Wushuang to bid, despite there were quite many valuable ones that caught the heavenly ultimate god's attention who competed for them. Time flew by and the auction had gone on for a full 3 days. Many treasures had been sold in those 3 days, but the enthusiasm of those experts taking part in the auction did not even decrease. However, Jian Wushuang began to feel uneasy as time went by. It's been 3 days, but the stately painting's bidding still hasn't started. Could it be? Jian Wushuang thought of a possibility that made him feel very uneasy. At that moment, the Golden Chief cleared his throat on the display stage and spoke with his incredibly resonant voice. "Honored guests, this auction has come to its finale. The next items are the 3 star treasures of this auction." His words immediately lit up the enthusiasm in the house. Many experts had their eyes burning with desire. Stars of the auction, it's finally starting? The 3 most valuable items featured are finally going to be auctioned. Thanks. I wonder what are the differences between these 3 items? The experts were incredibly curious. Even heavenly ultimate gods on the 3rd floor, the experts from Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan evidently became very serious before straightening their sitting posture. Usual treasures could hardly catch the attention of those top powers of the Danyang Holy Domain. As an example, very few of the many treasures being auctioned earlier could spark their interests and make them bid for it. However, the last 3 items were a different story. The 3 stars of the auction even sparked some curiosity in them. Contrary to the general emotions, Jian Wushuang sat in the individual room with a terribly gloomy face. "What I fear most has happened." Jian Wushuang clenched his fists as his gaze turned frosty. Earlier on, he caught words from the Black Chief that the stately painting would be auctioned in the event. As for when it would be auctioned, the Black Chief did not tell him due to the Star Picking Pavilion's rules, hence Jian Wushuang had no idea either. However, as the auction reached its finale, only 3 treasures were left, and since the stately painting had not appeared, it was clearly part of the 3 stars of the auction. Stars of the auction. What did star mean? Naturally, they would be the most valuable items and would receive the highest bids in the auction. For the Star Picking Pavilion to consider the stately painting a star of the auction, its final bid would be very high. Moreover, the heavenly ultimate gods on the 3rd floor and the experts from powerful clans would surely notice that treasure. They most probably would stand up and compete for it, trying to outbid those powerful clans. Jian Wushuang was truly not confident at all with that little bit of wealth he possessed. "Let's see. He'll have to think of other ways if it's not going to work." Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. On the display stage. "Honored guests, we'll now begin the auctioning of the 1st star. Please take a look." The Golden Chief waved his hand as an ancient scroll painting that was turning yellow immediately appeared on the display stage. The scroll painting looked ordinary at a glance, with nothing fascinating about it, such that nobody probably would lay their eyes on it even if they saw it on the streets. However, none of the partakers in this auction were ordinary people. Naturally, they could notice the unusual qualities of the scroll painting. Its extraordinary qualities originated from its energy, so ancient and mysterious that no one could figure it out. Everyone was staring at the scroll painting, but they felt as though they were staring into thin air or a shroud of mist. It was truly a strange feeling. Treasure. This is absolutely a unique and extraordinary treasure. Right away, the experts in the auction passed their judgments. Although they could not tell what the scroll painting was, they were certain it was an incredible treasure. While in the individual room, Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted immediately the moment he saw the painting. His body uncontrollably shook. Nobody else could identify the scroll painting, but he could with just a glance. That scroll painting had accompanied him for a long period of time. It even helped him out of limbo time and again, the stately painting. It was his ultimate treasure. Even till then he could still feel a connection with the stately painting in its current situation. The sense of connection was still very strong. Were it not for the restrictive shield around the edges of the display stage blocking his energy projection, he could have immediately reconnected with the stately painting and it would most certainly become excited. My old brother, we finally met again. Jianghu clenched his fists, his nails buried into his flesh. I take that all of you have recognized the extraordinary quality of this scroll painting. If that's the case, please let me make an introduction. The Golden Chief's voice resonated in the auction house. This item is called Stately Painting and was passed to the Star-Picking Pavilion by a territorial lord of a stellar region in Danyang Holy Domain. According to the territorial lord, the origin of this treasure is extremely mysterious. It did not originate from any ruin nor did it come from any expert's offspring. Instead, it was taken out of a shattered void while a pair of ultimate gods were fighting. The experts in the auction were rather shocked upon hearing his words. The void shattered and the treasure appeared in that shattered void. Was the treasure really that mysterious? Chapter 2608. Auctioning the Stately Painting. We have researched it since obtaining this treasure and had uncovered a message from it. The message is, the stately painting. The endless mountains and streams, dividing the world into 9 continents. The mountains and rivers as the palms and the 9 continents as the seal which created the world. The Golden Chief paused on purpose when he reached that point of his speech. As expected, it caused quite a stir in the auction with countless experts standing up in an uproar. The stately painting. The endless mountains and streams, dividing the world into 9 continents. The mountains and rivers as the palms and the 9 continents as the seal which created the world. It was a simple message, however. It was very domineering. Treasure, an absolute rare treasure. Many had their eyes burning with desire. Too bad. Although the Star-Picking Pavilion managed to extract the message from the treasure, recognize its uniqueness, and knowing that it's indeed an extraordinary treasure, we could not make it recognize us as its master despite the various methods we took. However, that doesn't prove anything as if it meets the right person. Perhaps the treasure might recognize him as its master, said the Golden Chief. The experts all nodded. There were indeed certain extraordinary treasures that would choose its own master. It only proved that the treasure did not look too highly upon him if that person could not make it recognize him as its master. However, if that person was fated for this treasure, it would naturally identify him as its master upon meeting him. None of the experts in the Star-Picking Pavilion could make the stately painting recognize a master. It only proved that the treasure had very high standards and naturally made its price shockingly high. A great number of experts in the auction, including the 2nd and 3rd floor experts, began to feel excited about it. Let's begin the bidding for the first star of the auction, the stately painting. The starting price is 100 million primordial stones. The Golden Chief projected his voice. As soon as the starting price was announced, a collective exclamation of shock resonated in the entire auction. The starting price itself was already 100 million primordial stones, and that was a first for the auction. The starting price had shattered most people's desire toward the stately painting. Even though there were numerous experts in the auction, those who immediately could present 100 million primordial stones were far and few. Moreover, the 100 million primordial stones were only the starting price. Jianghu face turned slightly gloomy when he heard the starting price. However, he immediately sat down slowly as though he had already calmed down. In his eyes, though, a sharp light was violently piercing out. There's absolutely no way I will be able to obtain it through the auction since the starting price is already 100 million. If that's the case, he'll have to resort to other methods, mumbled Jianghu to himself. Although 100 million primordial stones was an exorbitant starting price, there were quite a few people in the 3rd floor's rooms who could afford it. Those people had started bidding. 150 million primordial stones. A young master dressed in an expensive purple long robe sat casually in an individual room while holding a paper fan. Next to him was a sitting figure that projected waves of overpowering energy. The young master wore a slight smile before he murmured, "The stately painting is truly extraordinary and worthy of me taking action. Even if the treasure doesn't recognize anyone as its master after bringing it back to life in Death Tower, we could still give it away as a present and not lose much. However, if we are lucky to absorb the treasure, we will gain a lot." 200 million. A statue-like dark figure standing in an individual room. The figure was clad in black robes as cold energy seeped out from him as he stared at the stately painting on the display stage with a strange light in his eyes. A sense of greed could be seen deep inside his pupils. 300 million primordial stones. A bald and plump teenager holding a fruit made his bid. A heaven ultimate god old man frowned next to him and said, "Master Uncle, we didn't bring many primordial stones this time. Only a rough total of 150 million, and we're only at the first star of the auction. Although the stately painting is truly extraordinary, purchasing it comes with risks. If we spend too much to buy this item, we'll only be able to watch others bid for the next 2 stars of the auction." "I know that." The bald teenager continued munching on his fruit and smiled demonically before saying, "It's exactly because we didn't bring a lot of primordial stones that I purposely raised the bidding price so that the Dongfang clan and young palace master of Nanwu Palace will competitively offering even higher bids to fight for the stately painting. It will then put us in advantage when we bid for the next 2 treasures." The bald young man was not too interested in the stately painting but still kept bidding a higher price. He immediately raised the bid to 500 million when the young palace master of Nanwu Palace made an offer of 400 million primordial stones. The price continued and very quickly shot to a sky-high price under the competition between these high rollers. At that moment, in an unremarkable individual room on the 3rd floor of the auction house. An expert was in that room, but if anyone were observant enough, they would discover that he did not bid once to fight for even a single treasure since the auction started. Even after the stately painting appeared, the man in that individual room did not show the slightest bit of interest. In the room was a simple-looking white-haired old man clad in gray. The white-haired old man with murky eyes was sitting still like a meditating old monk. Nobody could tell if his eyes were opened or closed. Standing before him were 3 people. Among them was the purple-robed man, the supervisor of the Star-Picking Pavilion's Narcissus Territory branch. The other 2 were that branch's golden chiefs. The bald man was one of the 2 golden chiefs who had a relationship with San Shouwang and showed a certain interest in Jianghu Shuang. The golden chiefs of Star-Picking Pavilion enjoyed a high status in the auction house since there were only 3 golden chiefs at the Star-Picking Pavilion's Narcissus Territory branch. The supervisor held the highest authority at the branch, of course, that even the golden chiefs had to answer to him. His ability was also shockingly powerful as he was at the very limits of high-level Heaven Ultimate God with only a step away from reaching peak Heaven Ultimate God. However, the supervisor and his 2 golden chiefs stood respectfully before the white-haired old man with their heads bowed extremely low without showing any defiance at that moment. Chapter 2609. Senior Meng, to what do we owe this honor? The supervisor of Star-Picking Pavilion respectfully asked. "I'm here for the stately painting," said the white-haired old man slowly. "The stately painting? Didn't headquarters pass the stately painting to us for auction?" The purple-robed man frowned. The white-haired old man, Senior Meng, lightly spoke. "It's true, but the stately painting is different from other treasures. I've investigated it with those from the headquarters and all of us reached the same conclusion. The stately painting is a treasure that completely surpassed all levels of heavenly treasure, which is to say it's at least a holy treasure. Moreover, it's absolutely not an ordinary holy treasure." "What?" The faces of the purple supervisor and his 2 golden chiefs turned pale from shock. Surpassing the levels of a heavenly treasure? A holy treasure? Even among undying saints, there were only an extremely few who had exceptionally strong abilities or heaven-defying luck for them to own 1 or 2 holy treasures. The completely shocked purple supervisor asked, "Senior Meng, why did the headquarters let us sell it since it's a holy treasure?" He only complied with the order from the headquarters in asking them to put the stately painting up for auction. However, the Star-Picking Pavilion's headquarters never told them the treasure's actual level. Only when they heard it from Senior Meng were they shocked. That was a holy treasure. What was it doing in an auction like that? Furthermore, those who were fighting over the item were only a bunch of earthly ultimate gods and heavenly ultimate gods. Senior Meng indifferently said, "This matter is out of the ordinary. After we have appraised the stately painting as a very powerful and unique holy treasure, we spent a fortune to hire someone very important in helping us to make the stately painting recognize a master. That person has also agreed to help. However, he found that the stately painting has somehow already established a hidden connection with someone in the end. It's evident the stately painting is an owned item for it to possess that kind of connection." "An owned item?" The purple supervisor was startled. "The treasure isn't something we can cultivate and absorb easily since it already has an owner. According to its history, it was coincidentally taken out of a void. We could then determine the stately painting has lost its master due to a certain reason. It's exactly because of that, We dare not even keep this treasure in the star-picking pavilion any longer. This treasure is of an extremely high level after all. Its master who could cultivate, absorb, and control it must be someone who has extraordinary abilities. He's most probably a peak undying saint who possesses extremely terrifying abilities. He could also be in existence like Sword Lord Tong Xan who stood above other undying saints. He could even be someone who has surpassed those saints, a titanic figure who enjoys a huge reputation in the entire ancient god domain. A super expert like that isn't someone who should be crossed, even for star-picking pavilion. If the stately painting continues to stay in the star-picking pavilion, we can't guarantee the powerhouse won't show up at our door one day by tracing the hidden connection. We will be in deep trouble by then. Therefore, we have decided to send this stately painting back to Danyang Holy Domain where it was first discovered after our discussion by selling the item in the Holy Domain's biggest auction. The news will spread once the treasure is sold. If its owner is currently in Danyang Holy Domain, he will naturally look for it after hearing the news and ask for the item to be returned to him. Even if he isn't in Danyang Holy Domain, the treasure won't have much to do with our star-picking pavilion as he won't find it with us if its master comes to our doorsteps, spoke Senior Meng calmly. Is that so? The purple supervisor and his two golden chiefs took a nervous breath while listening to him. They began to feel pity toward those who were still trying to outbid each other over the stately painting. All of them thought that the stately painting was an extremely high-level treasure, which was indeed true. However, the stately painting was also a dangerous item that nobody should touch at the same time. If someone obtained it, he might be visited by a certain superior being. Senior Meng mumbled, "The reason I personally came today is to see who will obtain the stately painting in the end. After that, I shall follow that person so that I can perhaps meet the superior being." The purple supervisor and his two golden chiefs dared not dare say more. In the auction, the bidding price of the stately painting had gone up to 1,180,000,000 and it was still going up. However, there were only two people left who were still bidding. The two of them were Nanwu Palace's young palace master and the beautiful lady from Dongfang clan. 1,200,000,000 primordial stones. The beautiful lady from Dongfang clan bid again as her cold voice resonated in the auction house at the same time. Young palace master, it's just a unique treasure. Although its level is most probably high, it doesn't easily recognize a master. Do you really want to keep competing against me? If the next two treasures are even better than this stately painting, will you have enough capital to bid for those? I don't need you to worry about whether I have enough capital to bid for the next two items. Truth be told, I recently visited an extraordinary ruin and discovered quite a bit of resource before coming here. Even though they aren't worth a lot, they are still worth nearly 2 billion. Even if the stately painting still doesn't recognize a master after I obtained it, I could just treat it as a wasted trip to the ruins. The young palace master of Nanwu Palace laughed heartily. 1,300,000,000. The beautiful lattice face turned gloomy after she heard what he said. The Dongfang clan had a deep financial foundation and their wealth truly spoke louder than words. The beautiful lady happened to be one of the people who had control over the clan's properties, hence the amount she could control was extremely large. Though however large, it was still unwise to spend more than 1 billion primordial stones to purchase a unique treasure that contained certain risks. 1,300,000,000 primordial stones was her limit. "Forget it, I shall fulfill your desire since you crave the stately painting so much," said the beautiful lady before falling silent, who had apparently given up on competing. "Haha, thank you." Nanwu Palace's young palace master laughed. Finally, the stately painting fell into his hands with a final bidding price of 1,300,000,000 primordial stones. Chapter 2610, Huangji Golden Pill. In the individual room, Jian Wushuang sat calmly, but his expression was quite frosty. He raised his head and stared at the room of Nanwu Palace's young palace master. His eyes were burning with fire. Nanwu Palace's young palace master, huh? My old brother, please hang in there. They'll find you very soon. Jian Wushuang mumbled, but his voice was extremely cold. The auction continued. After the stately painting, the second star of the auction was presented. The second star of the auction was like the spiritual stone staff that Jian Wushuang sold, a treasure related to the soul. The only difference being a defensive soul treasure of the high-level heavenly treasure. It was common knowledge no matter the type of treasure that a defensive treasure was always more valuable than an offensive one. For example, an offensive divine treasure's worth was never as high as a defensive armor at the same level. A defensive soul treasure was also more valuable than an offensive soul treasure of the same level. The only difference was their not so large price variance. Even though it was a defensive soul treasure at the ordinary level heavenly treasure, it was still a lot more valuable than the spiritual stone staff Jianghu Shuang sold. Not to mention the soul defense treasure presented was already at high-level heavenly treasure. An increase of one level would increase the treasure's price by tenfold. The auction immediately started. The starting bid was still 10 million primordial stones, with the bids placed by experts in the third-floor individual rooms. Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, Nanwu Palace and Dongfang Clan were competing fiercely with each other. Nanwu Palace and Dongfang Clan especially competed for them fiercely. In the end, the treasure's price shot up to an astronomical figure of 1,800,000,000 primordial stones. The winning bidder for the item was the beautiful lady from Dongfang Clan. My brother's abilities are incomparably great. He's even one of the best among peak ultimate gods. Unfortunately, he's weaker when it comes to soul power and will be at a disadvantage when he's facing highly skilled experts in soul offense. This high-level heavenly treasure soul defensive treasure is just the right thing for him. Although we spent 1,800,000,000 primordial stones, it's worth it as long as it can help my brother improve his shortcoming, said the beautiful lady to herself. The bidding for the second star of the auction had ended. It was the auction for the third treasure star next, and also the auction's last treasure. Countless experts in the auction were waiting impatiently for the treasure. Each of the three treasure stars was incredibly valuable. One was sold for 1,300,000,000 primordial stones, while the other was sold for a total of 1,800,000,000 primordial stones. However, everybody knew the last star would truly be the most valuable item in the entire auction. That was the true star of the auction. Those experts in the auction knew very well that the last star treasure was not something ordinary people like them were qualified to bid for, but they were still filled with curiosity. They were wondering what that last treasure would be. On the display stage, the Golden Chief did not let them wait for too long, as he soon displayed the final treasure. Apparently, it was a golden elixir pill with a thick fragrance that made all those experts drool. That golden elixir pill was about the size of a baby's thumb with an extremely dark color. At the same time, the energy projected by the pill was unique. That energy felt like the energy of an emperor. Yes, an emperor's energy. Most experts in the auction looked perplexed when facing the elixir pill on the display stage. Some experts on the second and third floor individual rooms managed to identify the elixir pill. That's a Huangji golden pill? Yes, it's a Huangji golden pill. My goodness. The last treasure is actually a Huangji golden pill. That's crazy. Those four powers are gonna go nuts. Waves of exclamations could be heard from the individual rooms. It was indeed true. The faces of those from Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower and Dongfang Clan turned bright red and became breathless from the excitement when they saw the golden elixir pill. It's a Huangji golden pill? What an auction house star-picking pavilion is. The young palace master of Nanwu Palace had bright lights shining through his eyes. He immediately stood up and said, I have to get this Huangji golden pill no matter what it takes. Damn it. If I knew the last item is the Huangji golden pill, I won't have bought that soul defensive treasure for my brother. I've spent 1,800,000,000 primordial stones in one go to purchase it. Now I don't have much left. The expression of the Dongfang clan's beautiful lady froze. Quick. Immediately inform the clan and tell them to collect as many primordial stones for me as possible by all means. They can also bring cultivation resources of equal values. The heavenly ultimate gods of Dongfang clan nodded in full commitment. They knew it was an important matter. The experts learned more about the Huangji golden pill following the Golden Chief introducing it in the auction. A Huangji golden pill was extremely well known in the ancient god domain with its shockingly wide usage. It only worked on ultimate gods, with its effects almost equivalent to that of a divine demon nirvana elixir for divine demons. Divine demon nirvana elixir could help ordinary divine demons make a breakthrough in their cultivation in an extremely profound way. As for the Huangji golden pill, it could help ultimate god experts raise their cultivation level. Moreover, those who were below heavenly ultimate god level could have an 80% chance of making a breakthrough to the next level after taking a Huangji golden pill. For those who were above the heavenly ultimate god level, the probability of making a breakthrough was still extremely high after taking a Huangji golden pill. Most importantly, it even had great effects on grand ultimate gods. According to hearsay, if a powerful peak heavenly ultimate god took a Huangji golden pill, there was a 50% chance he could make a breakthrough to the grand ultimate god level. If a primary level grand ultimate god had eaten a Huangji golden pill, he would have nearly a 30% probability to make a breakthrough to high-level grand ultimate god. Even for a high-level grand ultimate god, he would still have a 10% probability to reach toward peak Grand Ultimate God by taking the Huangji Golden Pill. With such effects, it was extremely attractive to every Heavenly Ultimate God and Grand Ultimate God. Especially for the top powers of Danyang Holy Domain, Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower and Dongfang Clan. There has been no undying saint holding the fort at Danyang Holy Domain ever since the fall of Crimson Stone Saint. The Crimson Stone Fort was only superficially seen as the authority, while those few top powers only had a few Grand Ultimate God as their strongest expert. Chapter 26:11. Big Problema. Grand Ultimate God was just too rarely seen. If any of the top powers have even 10 Grand Ultimate Gods, it was considered very impressive. Each of those Grand Ultimate Gods was also the top power's main support pillars, as they possessed the highest battle strength level. Losing even a single one of them was an unimaginably huge loss. At the same time, it could bring them up a level if they could have one more Grand Ultimate God. Therefore, the Huangji Golden Pill, which offered a peak Heaven Ultimate God a 50% chance to make a breakthrough into Grand Ultimate God, was extremely important to them. The auction for the Huangji Golden Pill soon began. The starting bid itself was already 1 billion primordial stones. In a very short period, the price had gone up to 2 billion, which was double the starting bid. Moreover, the experts in the third-floor individual rooms, especially those who were representing the top powers, had been competing with each other fiercely, hence the price continued to climb. This is insane. That's too crazy. It's already 30 billion primordial stones and yet they continue to bid? 30 billion is an unimaginable number for me. Waves of exclamations were filling the auction house. As time flew by, the Huangji Golden Pill's price had climbed up to an astronomical 50 billion. At that rate, there were not many left who could continue bidding. In the end, it was again the young palace master of Nanwu Palace and the beautiful lady from Dongfang Clan who competed against each other. The beautiful lady coldly asked, "How many resources can we move around? We only have 52 billion primordial stones when adding on to the amount the clan had temporarily transferred to us with what we have now. That's everything we can gather in such a short time," said one of the Heaven Ultimate Gods. 52 billion? The beautiful lady made her final bid without hesitation. At that moment, Nanwu Palace's young palace master wore a dark expression as he was also calculating the number of resources he could control. "Fortunately, I found quite a bit of stuff at the ruins. Even though I have spent quite a lot on the stately painting, I could still outbid the Dongfang clan woman with the remaining 60 billion or so when adding on to my properties and the resources that were prepared beforehand by the palace." 53 billion? As the young palace master made his bid again, the Dongfang clan's room turned silent. Not competing anymore? The young palace master of Nanwu Palace shot a cold glance at Dongfang clan's room. Umph. A cold harumph came out of that individual room. "You truly are the young palace master of Nanwu Palace to bring so many resources with you. You win this time, but don't get cocky now, as even though you spent an incredible amount on this Huangji Golden Pill, it's still a question whether you safely can bring it back to Nanwu Palace." "Oh, are you trying to scare me, Madame Dongfang?" Nanwu Palace's young palace master coldly said. "I'm not trying to scare you, of course. After all, how many in the Danyang Holy Domain can really scare the young palace master of Nanwu Palace? However, Huangji Golden Pill is such a precious item, and many desperately desire it. I'm merely reminding you out of kindness due to the friendship between the Dongfang clan and Nanwu Palace. I have no desire to worry about the rest, so take care." As the beautiful lady finished speaking, she stood up and started leaving the room. The auction for the last star treasure had ended, which indicated the end of the auction event. Naturally, the beautiful lady had no reason to continue staying there. Not only her but also most of those experts who took part in the auction left with sighs and feelings of loss. Of course, several experts did not immediately leave. Especially those in the third-floor individual rooms, most of those powerful Heaven Ultimate Gods did not immediately leave. Although they were staying inside their respective rooms, their eyes were burning with greed while staring at Nanwu Palace's young palace master's room. The young palace master and the beautiful lady of Dongfang clan did not hide their identity when competing at all. Everyone also knew that 2 of the 3 treasure stars had fallen into the young palace master's hands, and the star treasures were very attractive to those Heaven Ultimate Gods, especially the Huangji Golden Pill. That's a big problem. Jianghu was still staying in his room and began to frown. Although he could not see the facial expressions of the Heaven Ultimate Gods on the 3rd floor, he could guess what was running through their minds. A Huangji Golden Pill was enough for them to go insane and do whatever it takes to obtain it. Although the Huangji Golden Pill was in the hands of the young palace master, his strong family background and those few heaven ultimate gods around him could not fend away the experts who were drooling over the pill. In other words, he had become everyone's target. He would be fine as long as he stayed inside the star-picking pavilion. However, as soon as he left their place, just like what the beautiful lady from Dongfang clan said, although he had obtained the Huangji Golden Pill, it was questionable whether he could safely bring it back to Nanwu Palace. As for Jian Wushuang, he had not much interest in the Huangji Golden Pill even though it was very valuable. The only item he wanted was the stately painting. Earlier, he was the only one targeting Nanwu Palace's young palace master and was already not confident about taking the stately painting from him. However, his problem just grew even bigger since so many people were targeting young palace master at that point. Well, looks he'll have to play by ear. Jian Wushuang squinted slightly. In Nanwu Palace's room on the 3rd floor. Young palace master, we've brought the stately painting and Huangji Golden Pill over. The golden chief who hosted the auction personally presented the 2 treasures to the young palace master. The young palace master simply took a glance at it and immediately passed an interspatial ring he had prepared earlier to the golden chief. Following the successful transaction, both treasures were in the young palace master's possession without ordeal. The treasures are at hand, but to leave this place and return safely to Nanwu Palace will be quite a challenge. The young palace master of Nanwu Palace frowned. It will be a breeze if they are only ordinary treasures. Even if they are more valuable ones, those heaven ultimate god won't have the guts to come at me for that treasure. However, the Huangji Golden Pill is different as it's sufficient to make any heaven ultimate god go crazy. There should be quite a few heaven ultimate gods taking part in the auction and all of them know that Huangji Golden Pill is in my possession. I'm afraid a siege is inevitable as soon as I leave this place. Chapter 26:12. Battle begins. Transmit a message into the palace and tell them to send reinforcements, said the young palace master of Nanwu Palace. One of the heaven ultimate gods of Nanwu Palace immediately did as he was ordered. The auction had ended completely. Most experts had left, only a few top experts were still staying in star-picking pavilion. The people of Nanwu Palace were still there as well. Even though many experts were lusting over Huangji Golden Pill, they dared not take immediate action and had to control themselves as they were in a star-picking pavilion branch after all. They were waiting for the people of Nanwu Palace to leave the star-picking pavilion. Jian Wushuang was waiting quietly as well. The wait took a total of 10 days. After 10 days, the young palace master of Nanwu Palace finally began to depart. As soon as the Nanwu Palace people stepped out of star-picking pavilion, a large number of experts including Jian Wushuang immediately followed behind. That's a lot of people. There are too many experts targeting him. Jian Wushuang's eyes were showing worries. As he glided along, he expanded his soul power and sensed the energy of the experts around him in detail. There were 100 of them at the Earth Ultimate God realm or above. Even though Earth Ultimate Gods were just there to watch and did not plan to join in the action, there were still more than 20 Heaven Ultimate Gods pursuers. Not for a minute did Jian Wushuang ever think the 20 over Heaven Ultimate God was there to just watch instead of taking action. Besides, that number was only those who Jian Wushuang's soul power could sense. He believed more experts were hiding in the surrounding void who have kept their presence hidden. With this many experts targeting Huangji Golden Pill, when the battle starts, Jian Wushuang shuddered. The crowd followed behind the young palace master. They very soon left the city and arrived at the wide borderless void. They're probably going to start, mumbled Jian Wushuang to himself. As he expected, he could sense several Heaven Ultimate Gods' speed accelerated and caught up to block the path of those Nanwu Palace men within the sensing parameters of his soul power. In only a short moment, you're only a few Heaven Ultimate Gods and dare touch Nanwu Palace. Perhaps you're sick of living. The Nanwu Palace's young palace master's growl resonated between heaven and earth. Following the growl, the Heaven Ultimate Gods unleashed their heaven-shaking divine aura and took action. The big battle began in a blink. Boom, 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 boom. The terrifying booming sounds exploded one after another while clanging noises could be heard from the void ahead. The noises resonated throughout the heavens and the immense divine power expanded to a great distance. Although Jian Wushuang and the rest of the Earth Ultimate Gods who were there to watch the action were quite a distance away from the battlegrounds, they could still feel the intense clashing of energy in the fight which made their hearts pounded violently. Even Jian Wushuang was shocked. He was not considered weak at that point when it came to ability. Although his level was quite low at just a peak Ultimate God, his battle strength was strong enough to face a peak Earth Ultimate God. Therefore he was still considered very powerful even when standing among actual peak Earth ultimate gods. However, the void ahead was filled with not just 1 or 2 heaven ultimate gods battling, but more than 10. Such a battle was really not something he could interfere in. Excluding the young palace master, Nanwu Palace only has 4 heaven ultimate gods. Although they are very strong, they are facing the attack of a dozen heaven ultimate gods and won't be able to withstand it. In addition, there are still quite a few heaven ultimate gods in the surrounding void who are drooling over Huangji Golden Pill but yet to take action. Nanwu Palace seems to be in a less than ideal situation. However, the Nanwu Palace people aren't fools either. They probably know that they are being watched. The fact that they dare walk out of Star-Picking Pavilion must mean they have something to rely on. If my guess is right, there have to be quite a few Nanwu Palace experts hiding somewhere in the surrounding void. Jin Wushuang squinted his eyes and looked around. Just as he expected, when the battle only went on for a short moment and the 4 heaven ultimate gods were at a disadvantage. Boom, boom, boom. 10 waves of overpowering energy suddenly burst in from one direction. The sudden appearance of the 10 men left the heaven ultimate gods in battle shocked beyond belief. Even the observers outside the battlefield were incredibly surprised. The shock was only natural because the lineup of those 10 was too powerful. Among the 10 men, 8 of them were heaven ultimate gods while the other 2 were a blonde youth and red-bearded strong-looking man with a battle axe. The energy they were projecting was far beyond the heaven ultimate gods and reaching an all-new level. Grand ultimate gods. The 2 of them were complete grand ultimate gods in the flesh and blood. As soon as the 2 grand ultimate gods and 8 heaven ultimate gods arrived, the men from Nanwu Palace including the young palace master rushed over to them. They were no doubt also from Nanwu Palace. 2 grand ultimate gods, 8 heaven ultimate gods. What a lineup. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists. The many expert observers around were also exclaiming, "This is grand. So grand." Nanwu Palace is truly worthy of its reputation. They could afford to send over such a lineup in one go. No wonder the young palace master dared come out of the star-picking pavilion. Looks like Nanwu Palace has set its mind on keeping the Huangji Golden Pill. The crowd exclaimed all together. In the middle of the battlefield, the dozen of heaven ultimate gods who attacked Nanwu Palace was in trouble. "You're really tired of living since you dare target Nanwu Palace. Kill 'em all." The 10 men who came from Nanwu Palace immediately attacked under the 2 grand ultimate gods' leadership. The table turned in an instant. On the edge of the battlefield, the slender gray-clad white-haired senior Meng squinted and stood in the void. Behind him were the very respectful Star-Picking Pavilion's purple supervisor and his 3 golden chiefs. Naturally, they very clearly saw everything that transpired on the battlefield. That's Nanwu Palace for you, sending out 2 grand ultimate gods and 8 heaven ultimate gods in one go. Looks like no one can stop them from keeping Huangji Golden Pill, exclaimed the purple supervisor. Haha, it's not that simple. Senior Meng smiled faintly. The puzzled purple supervisor asked, "Senior Meng, do you mean that things might change? I can tell from the looks of it." Senior Meng did not elaborate further but wore a mysterious smile instead. As he predicted, a few beams of overpowering energy burst out from the surrounding void not long after the arrival of those 10 Nanwu Palace experts. 3 grand ultimate gods and a few very powerful heaven ultimate gods immediately appeared on the battlefield. Chapter 26:13. Let's do it. They're from the Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower and Dongfang Clan. The purple-robed supervisor's heart shook. Danyang Holy Domain has been a mess since Crimson Stone Saint's death. The top cultivation sects have always been competing covertly against each other and very few of them would fight overtly. However, a Huangji Golden Pill was all it took to make them fight. Senior Meng sneered and continued, "No matter how fierce they might be fighting, it has nothing to do with the Star-Picking Pavilion, of course. What caught my interest is the stately painting. I don't know if the stately painting's owner will appear in this battle." The battle had reached a feverish stage. Although the strong lineup of experts from Nanwu Palace caused a commotion, they were not the only ones who came well prepared. The Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower and Dongfeng Clan had also come prepared. The 3 top cultivation sects took action at the same time, and it was worth mentioning that they were working tacitly. Nanwu Palace fell into a disadvantage under the pressure of those 3 top sections. In the void outside the battlefield, Jian Wushuang was closely watching the battle. There are dozens of heaven ultimate gods and 5 grand ultimate gods in this battle. There's nothing I can do to disturb the battle, not even a chance for me to fish in troubled waters. Jian Wushuang frowned. It's almost impossible for me to sneak into the battlefield with so many pairs of eyes watching and kill the young palace master of Nanwu Palace for his interspatial ring unless I use that trick. Jianghu Shuang groaned secretly. He still had a trump card, which was something extremely terrifying and unusual. It was very risky for him to play that card because of its extraordinary and shocking nature. He might fall into a dead end should anything go very wrong. Therefore he hesitated and struggled to make a decision. However, he did not take long to make his decision. I finally found the stately painting, and it's now with the Nanwu Palace's young palace master. Even if any of those on the battlefield manage to get it today, they will not be able to claim ownership, hence there will be a possibility it might be transferred to another person. It'll be extremely difficult for me to locate it again if it goes to a high-ranking and powerful expert. I can't miss it since the opportunity is right in front of me now. Let's do it. A hint of madness was driving Jianghu Shuang to make the decision, but he was also quite determined. Thereafter, his figure slowly receded into the void behind. He retreated to an extremely quiet and empty place before changing his outfit. Initially, he was wearing a golden robe while carrying a long sword without masking his appearance and looking very young. However, he soon had turned into a mysterious expert completely shrouded in a black robe with a black ferocious-looking mask over his face. He had completely kept his breath of power concealed while leaving no traces that could reveal his identity. He then slowly walked towards the battlefield. The war was still going on fiercely on the battlefield. The brawny red-bearded man from Nanwu Palace furiously said, "Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower and Dongfang Clan. Well. You'd better make sure I leave my body behind on this battlefield today. Otherwise I'll make the three of you pay the price." The Grand Ultimate God from Divine Demon Sect coldly exclaimed, "How are you threatening us? Do you think Nanwu Palace is the Crimson Stone Fort? Even if it's the Crimson Stone Fort, it's now in a mess and can no longer threaten us. What can a small Nanwu Palace do? Don't talk nonsense with him anymore and just kill him. The Nanwu Palace won't hand over the Huangji Golden Pill obediently if we don't teach him a lesson," said the Grand Ultimate God from Dongfang Clan. "Yes, although we probably can't kill both Grand Ultimate Gods of Nanwu Palace, we can still find ways to kill the Heaven Ultimate Gods and their young Palace Master. I bet the Palace Master will go crazy if the young Palace Master died," said a cold old man with a sneer. He was the Life and Death Tower's Grand Ultimate God. "Haha, let's kill them." The experts from the three top sects were no longer holding back and began fighting without reservation. Countless experts watched the battle, but none dared to intervene. It was at that moment, a black-robed man with a black ferocious-looking mask emerged slowly from the surrounding void and walked towards the battlefield. They could not sense the black-robed man's aura, and no one even noticed him when he first appeared in the void. The people around him finally noticed his presence when he appeared at the battlefield's peripheral. Who's that person? Is he fighting for the Huangji Golden Pill as well? Black robe? Black mask? He's probably worried that these top sects will one day seek revenge with him, so he deliberately covers up his appearance. Maybe he's not that strong after all. Although many experts had noticed the black-robed man, they did not pay much attention to him. The Huangji Golden Pill was of great use to Heaven Ultimate Gods and even Grand Ultimate Gods. It had attracted the attention of the many experts on the battlefield, hence it did not raise caution that someone else was also interested. The people who were watching the battle and the experts who were madly slaying away on the battlefield both felt the same, with no one taking the black-robed man seriously. The black-robed man walked to the edge of the battlefield and slowly stopped. Next, boom. A unique but supreme pressure came from the black-robed man without warning. The pressure was not from the breath of divine power, nor was it the divine aura. Instead, it was coming from his life rating, the type of pressure from a supreme being. The black-robed man discharged the pressure and it instantly spread into the 9 skies and 10 earths before completely enshrouding the world. Heaven and earth were instantly shaken up as the huge world and space-time were disrupted and violently shook. The violent wind was so strong that it was driving the world and everything else within the world to worship that black-robed man. The battle that was going on seemed to have instantly died down due to the emergence of his life-rating pressure. All the experts from Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan were staring at Jianghu Shuang along with those heavenly ultimate gods and 5 grand ultimate gods. Their eyes showed an inconceivable horror and terror. Their bodies were trembling. Thump, thump, everyone started kneeling. Chapter 26:14. Life Conquers All. In addition to those people who fought on the battlefield, Many experts and Earth Ultimate Gods who stood watching from a distance outside the battlefield, including a few Heaven Ultimate Gods, all knelt with their eyes widened in surprise. Even Star-Picking Pavilion's purple-robed supervisor and his 3 golden chiefs in the secluded void could not control their legs, joining the others in kneeling. The only person barely enduring the pressure and keeping himself from kneeling was Senior Meng. This pressure. Even I can barely stop myself from kneeling? Senior Meng stared at his trembling legs and took a sharp breath of cold air. He was a genuine undying saint and also the most powerful expert at that moment. That was probably the reason he was able to keep himself up. In addition, he was quite far away from the battlefield where the life-rating pressure was mainly asserting on before disseminated to its surrounding void, therefore it was not as strong in his current location and somewhat allowed him to resist the pressure. However, he truly felt fear in him. This person. Senior Meng looked with a terrified expression at the mysterious black-robed man who was at the edge of the battlefield. The other experts present had also stopped what they were doing and turned their attention to that black-robed man. The experts, including the 5 Grand Ultimate Gods from those 4 top sects, were frantically struggling to stand up but appeared weak under the extreme life-rating pressure. They felt as though they were not facing a human cultivator, but the boundless world or universe. As though they were just some unremarkable ants in the infinitely wide world. Expert? Super expert? Is he an undying saint? No, even an undying saint will never be able to oppress Grand Ultimate Gods like us and force us to worship him on our knees. His oppressive pressure is so extraordinary and nothing like divine power. It's something even more terrifying and intimidating than divine power pressure. It's not something within the capabilities of an undying saint. This person is definitely above the undying saint. A super expert above the undying saint? My goodness. Could he be after the Huangji Golden Pill as well? That can't be right. Even if it's a treasure worth 100 or even 1,000 times more valuable than the Huangji Golden Pill, it's insignificant in the face of such a powerful person. Let alone the Huangji Golden Pill. The experts were soon in suffocation. Their bodies trembled from feeling terrified, but no one dared to utter even a single word. They could only grumble and complain in their hearts while trying to guess the reason such a super expert was there. None dared to speak for fear of irritating the super expert. The battlefield fell into complete silence with those countless experts surrendering themselves to the mysterious black-robed expert. Suddenly, the mysterious black-robed expert moved. He moved slowly like he was sauntering in a garden and arrived at the battlefield center in just a few steps. He went up to the Nanwu Palace's young palace master. The Nanwu Palace's young palace master was no longer in his usual posture as he was prostrating with his head hung low without even daring to look up at the mysterious black-robed expert. Nanwu Palace's young palace master remained in that posture until the mysterious black-robed expert finally stopped in front of him. The black-robed expert slowly stretched out his palm. The young palace master was frightened and said, "Sir, I've already given the Huangji Golden Pill to Elder Heng. The Huangji Golden Pill is with that person over there." The young palace master pointed his finger to the blonde youth next to him who was one of the Grand Ultimate Gods from Nanwu Palace. The young palace master thought that Huangji Golden Pill might not be safe in his hands, hence he had given it to the Nanwu Palace Grand Ultimate God for safekeeping before the battle. He thought the mysterious black-robed expert was after the Huangji Golden Pill, so he pointed the mysterious black-robed expert toward it. Unexpectedly, the mysterious black-robed expert did not even glance at the blonde youth. His exposed cold eyes remained looking down on the young palace master. His low and hoarse voice emerged from behind the mask. "The stately painting in your hand. Hand over it now and I'll spare your life." The stately painting? The Nanwu Palace young palace master was startled. The experts present were stunned. Everyone thought the mysterious black-robed expert was also after the Huangji Golden Pill, but they were surprised that his target was the stately painting. Did he say his stately painting? Many of them reflected on the mysterious black-robed expert's words. Senior Ming's eyes were twinkling in the void not far away. So, it's exactly as I expected. The stately painting indeed has a master, and someone who can maneuver such a holy treasure must be a great cultivator, probably a top-tier undying saint. He's probably someone invincible who surpasses the undying saint level. His appearance even made an undying saint like me feel compelled to kneel and worship him despite such a far distance between both of us. This level of strength must have exceeded the level of an undying saint. He's indeed an invincible expert. I didn't expect to see a super expert like this again in my lifetime. I can now die without regrets. Senior Meng softly sighed. The still kneeling star-picking tower purple-robed executive and his 3 golden chiefs behind Senior Meng were so cautious they dared not even breath out loudly. "What's going on? Did you not hear what I've said?" The black-robed man spoke again with a flat voice. "And no, I've heard it. The stately painting is with me. I'll immediately take it out." The young palace master dared not hesitate and immediately retrieved the old and browned painting from his interspatial ring. The stately painting which he bought from the auction at the price of 1,300,000,000 primordial stones. He initially bought the painting out of curiosity and thought of bringing it home with him to try claiming ownership of it. It was only at that moment he realized the stately painting already had an owner. Its master was someone incredibly powerful. Chapter 26:15. Finally got it. Nanwu Palace's young palace master took out the stately painting, an old picture scroll that was originally yellowish with faded prints, and instantly shot a ray-dazzling light. There was no need for the black-robed man to do anything, as the picture scroll instantly turned into a light stream and flew toward the black-robed man. The stately painting zoomed toward the black-robed man before excitedly going round and round the black-robed man. It looked like a child who had just been reunited with its parents after being separated for 2 or 3 days. The many experts present on and around the battlefield were no longer doubtful. The stately painting belonged to the mysterious black-robed man for sure. Otherwise, it would not have zoomed toward the black-robed man and excitedly went around him. The black-robed man gently beckoned the stately painting as it turned into a ray of light before fusing into his divine body and disappeared. The black-robed man raised his head slightly and glanced around the battlefield after that. "I'm only here to retrieve my lost treasure. You may carry on. I won't be participating." He spoke in his low and slightly hoarse voice before turning around in front of countless experts and slowly strode toward the distant void. The black-robed man slowly walked off 1 step at a time and was moving around very casually, but even so, the countless experts in the void remained in kneeling position with none dared to breathe out loud. In the void, the star-picking pavilion purple-robed supervisor reminded, "He's leaving Senior Meng." Senior Meng nodded slightly and thought of catching up with the black-robed expert to befriend him. However, he quickly dismissed that thought. Firstly, Senior Meng reckoned the mysterious black-robed expert was extremely strong. The expert was much stronger than Senior Meng's original assumptions, as such a super expert could easily destroy the entire star-picking pavilion with just a flip of his hand. Although Senior Meng was an undying saint himself, he knew he was merely a firefly when compared to the mysterious black-robed expert who was bright like the moon. Senior Meng had some self-awareness. If he knew that the other party was an undying saint, Senior Meng would not mind going forth to make friends with him, even if he was somewhat an invincible undying saint like the Sword Lord Tong Xen. However, he could not simply make a move toward someone above the undying saint realm. In other words, he was not qualified to be associated with such powerful beings as an undying saint. Secondly, even if Senior Meng wanted to force himself on the other party without minding his identity and be acquainted with him, he had to be able to move his body first. Although the black-robed expert was slowly leaving the void, the supreme life rating pressure on Senior Meng did not get any lesser. Senior Meng was standing still under the pressure. He did not kneel like the others around him. He was trembling and stood in place just like the others. What could he do when he was unable to even move? After a while, the mysterious black-robed expert finally disappeared from everyone's sight. The life rating pressure that flooded heaven and earth finally dissipated. Once the pressure disappeared, the many experts present felt a sense of relief. All of them let out a long sigh and slowly stood up. However, their limbs were still trembling despite being able to move freely and stand up again. That was scary. The Earth Ultimate Gods, Heaven Ultimate Gods, and those 5 Grand Ultimate Gods present had never encountered such a terrifying expert in their cultivation journey thus far. They had never experienced such great fears just from the pressures exerted by the other party. It was their first time. Who's that person just now? I don't know, but he's a bewildering super expert. He's probably a top-tier super expert in the infinite territory, or maybe even in the legendary third heaven. He's too terrifying. I felt my soul about to completely shatter just moments ago. I've lived for a few 100,000 years and that's the first time I'm so horrified. All the experts started a discussion. In the middle of the battlefield, the experts from Nanwu Palace, Divine Demon Sect, Life and Death Tower, and Dongfang Clan looked miserable. However, soon their expressions eased and had gradually recovered. The master is a powerful expert that came only for his treasure. He left after retrieving his treasure and was not interested in the Huangji Golden Pill at all. The Huangji Golden Pill is still with Nanwu Palace. said the elder from Life and Death Tower coldly, whose voice echoed on the battlefield. The two grand ultimate gods from Divine Demon Sect and Dongfang clan peeked over. The experts from those three powerful sects exchanged looks before, kill. The war broke out again. Although the appearance of the mysterious black-robed expert gave them a shock, he left after retrieving the stately painting. The Huangji golden pill was not taken away, so the battle over the pill was unaffected. The three top sects joined forces and once again fought madly against the people from Nanwu Palace. The battlefield became fiery hot again. Let's go. Senior Meng turned around and headed toward the star-picking pavilion. Senior Meng, this battle? The purple-robed supervisor was surprised. I'm here only to see the stately painting's owner. There's no need for me to be around since I've seen him. You may stay and watch the battle for the Huangji golden pill if you like. Senior Meng smiled and left. There was a dense forest quite far away in a void from the battlefield. The man who wore a black ferocious-looking mask on his face and assumed by many to be a super expert superior to an undying saint appeared in the void and went straight into the dense forest. The mysterious black-robed expert stayed low for a long time deep in the dense forest. After he made sure there was no one following him, he took off the mask and revealed an extremely young face. He was none other than Jian Wushuang. I've taken a huge risk and won the bet. I was right. Jian Wushuang clasped his hands tightly. He was trembling slightly from excitement as his eyes gleamed with a look of surprise. The old and yellowish picture scroll appeared in his hands with just a thought. Stately painting, old mate, I finally found you. Jian Wushuang smiled. Although he was smiling happily, his back was soaking wet with sweat. Chapter 26:16. Third Heaven. Before the many experts, he looked majestic and intimidating at the scene with Heaven Ultimate Gods and Grand Ultimate Gods surrendered under his feet, but he was also on the cusp of what could be a storm, as all he had was the supreme life rating pressure. His true strength was far inferior to anyone on that battlefield. Any random Heaven Ultimate Gods were enough to crush him. Therefore he had to maintain an imposing posture without allowing any room for mistakes. Otherwise he would not be able to leave the battlefield safely, let alone retrieve his stately painting once his strength level was exposed. He had simply done a very good job at disguising himself to the extent that those experts on the battlefield had completely believed him to be an invincible super expert. The extremely powerful life rating pressure he exerted was of course the crux behind his disguise. Even Crimson Stone Saint knelt when he unleashed his life rating pressure in the saint's tomb, hence it was tried and tested that even an undying saint could not withstand the pressure he exerted. That made the experts on the battlefield believe Jian Wushuang must be an extremely powerful super expert to be able to display such terrifying pressure. In addition, he was a perfect chaotic creature who had exceptional abilities in manipulating his divine power breath. No one would be able to discover his real cultivation realm as long as he did not take actions to reveal his divine power level, including Heaven Ultimate Gods, Grand Ultimate Gods, and the Undying Saints in seclusion. None of them could see Jian Wushuang's real cultivation realm. The unknown and ambiguity built a daunting experience for those experts on the battlefield. Those 2 points convinced the experts on the battlefield that Jian Wushuang was indeed a super expert. In addition, Jian Wushuang did very well in his disguise, as he had not hesitated to leave the battlefield upon receiving the stately painting. The Nanwu Palace's young palace master would have no qualms handing over the Huangji golden pill, and Jian Wushuang could have gotten the Huangji golden pill had he asked pushingly. If he had done so, it might have raised doubts about his true identity. The Huangji golden pill was only useful for the ultimate gods after all. He was trying to portray himself as a super expert who was superior to undying saints, so why would he even care for a Huangji golden pill at his level? Even if he were to get one for his disciples, he did not need to snatch the pill from those groups of experts. Countless forces and sects might be vying to give him the Huangji golden pill upon his request. Matters might have taken a different route had those experts been dubious of Jian Wushuang's identity. Therefore, Jian Wushuang was very clear with what he wanted and was not greedy for the Huangji golden pill. He merely turned around and left after getting the stately painting, which only made the entire process of retrieving his stately painting and evacuation went smoothly. Although I've successfully obtained the stately painting, I've also displayed my strongest trump card, the life rating pressure of a perfect chaotic creature. The pressure would have probably alerted the will of Heavenly Way. Jian Wushuang calmed down before raising his head and looked at the void above. Taoist Xian Shen once told him that he must not display his life rating pressure unless it was necessary. The will of Heavenly Way would be alerted of his existence once he displayed that skill. Although it was not a life or death situation, The stately painting was very important to him and he would not want to miss it. He decided to take the risk and perform the technique after carefully considering the pros and cons. This place is far away from the third heaven, which made the will of Heavenly Way relatively weak. As this is the first time I'm using it, it will be relatively difficult to locate where I am even if I've alerted the will of Heavenly Way. They'll just need to be cautious and abstain from displaying this technique for the second time, murmured Jianwu. Taoist Xian Shen had also mentioned before that if he used the technique outside of third heaven once or twice, it would be relatively hard for the will of Heavenly Way to detect his location. At the time, there were no changes from heaven above and earth below when he exerted his life rating pressure. He probably managed to avoid being detected since there was no pressure convergence from the will of Heavenly Way. However, if that happens again, I must immediately leave the Danyang Holy Domain and go as far away as I can, even if the will of Heavenly Way doesn't come after me, said Jianwu solemnly. He had too much on his shoulder and could not afford to lose, so he had to be cautious not to make even a slight mistake. Otherwise, it might cause a detrimental effect on himself, the Seven Stars Black Sect, and the eternal chaotic world. Let's leave here first and find a place to regain control over the stately painting, muttered Jianwu, who soon left the forest. The third heaven where countless experts yearned to be was located somewhere in an extremely remote territory. Somewhere within the third heaven's core, on a dojo's high platform, the white-robed bald man who was preaching to billions of divine demons immediately and suddenly felt something after Jianwu exerted his life rating pressure. It's indeed outside of the third heaven. The white-robed bald man spoke faintly, but his voice was inaudible to the billions of divine demons who were listening to his lecture. His voice instead reached the ears of several other realm lords under the guidance of his subconscious mind. In a bloodied space, the cold and beautiful woman softly replied, "This is troublesome. The infinite territory is outside the third heaven where the will of Heavenly Way is weak and our influences are hard to reach. Even if we know he's right there in the infinite territory, we won't be able to find him." In the eternal burning flame, the purple-armored devil awakened as a cold voice came from him. "There's nothing we can do now. We can only continue waiting for the day he steps out of the infinite territory and arrives in the third heaven. Another option will be when he uses his special techniques in the infinite territory again and is detected by the will of Heavenly Way. As long as the will of Heavenly Way can roughly pinpoint his location, even if it's only a vague direction or guidance, I'm sure we can hunt him down." The blood-clothed woman laughed casually in an exquisite mansion. "Oh, we can only wait then, but I'm sure he's not stupid. If he knows he's targeted by the will of Heavenly Way, he won't use this unique technique in the future again. I'm afraid it's not realistic for him to do so again, but we can wait for him to set foot in the third heaven one day, as it'll be much easier to find him then. Well, let's adjourn for now." The purple-armored devil spoke again before his voice faded away. The four very powerful realm lords were communicating with each other over a long distance, and all of them went back to what they were doing after a short exchange. Chapter 26:17 Thousand Treasures Grand World. There was a cave that was temporarily hewn up in a barren and desolate mountain range. Jianwu sat cross-legged in the cave while the stately painting quietly suspended in midair before him. The stately painting was his treasure and had a long-standing relationship with him, thus it was easy for him to regain control of the stately painting when refining it again. A large amount of information was channeled into his mind after that. "So, that's it." Jianwu looked a little surprised. "I was too weak in my past life. Although I possessed the stately painting, I couldn't bring out its full potential. What I could do is only some insignificant techniques, even if it's a secret technique within the stately painting. In the previous life, Jianwu had only performed the 9 provinces seal. That technique was extremely tyrannical. However, Jianwu quickly realized the 9 provinces seal was not the only secret technique available in the stately painting. 4 secret techniques came along with the stately painting. Among the 4 secret techniques, the 9 provinces seal was the easiest technique to comprehend and perform. Besides that, Jianwu probably had not completely mastered the 9 provinces seal in his previous life, as he no longer felt the 9 provinces seal being as difficult as he had thought in his past life. In his past life, he only knew the 9 provinces seal represented the 9 provinces in heaven and earth, consisting of 9 styles, with one being more powerful than the other. However, the 9 provinces seal's essence laid in the styles being superimposed and fused. The first 3 styles were fused to achieve the Divine Emperor seal. The next 3 styles were to make the True Emperor seal. The last 3 styles, on the other hand, would achieve the most powerful Supreme seal. The Divine Emperor seal, True Emperor seal, and Supreme Seal were the three most terrifying hidden styles of the 9 Provinces seal. It was a pity that he could not even fully display the last 3 styles of the 9 Provinces seal in his previous life, let alone fusing and superimposing them. He had never come in contact with the Divine Emperor Seal, True Emperor Seal, or Supreme Seal. He was finally qualified to come in contact with them in his current life. Jianghu secretly said, "I can easily execute all 9 styles in the 9 Provinces seal with my current strength. It shouldn't be difficult for me to display the Divine Emperor Seal, True Emperor Seal, and Supreme Seal, but it'll take me some time to study them." In addition to the 9 Province seal, there was another secret technique he could display among the 4 secret techniques. The 1,000 Treasures Grand World Secret Technique. The 1,000 Treasures Grand World Transformation. That was a technique that forcibly transformed the world into one more suitable for battle. There were many different worlds in the 1,000 Treasures Grand World. The Life and Death World, Yin and Yang World, and Water and Fire World. In addition, there were also conducive battle worlds for Jianghu, Spacetime World, Transmigration World, and Sword Principle World. Even though mastering that technique might not improve his overall strength by much, it was enough to make a change in his battle strategies. The 9 Provinces seal and 1,000 Treasures Grand World are just 2 secret techniques in stately painting which I can study and perform now. The remaining 2 secret techniques in the stately painting aren't something I'm capable of doing now, murmured Jianghu. He knew the stately painting was so precious and extremely difficult to obtain one in the entire ancient god domain, hence the secret techniques which came with it were not something easily executed. It would be extremely helpful to him nonetheless if he was able to master the 9 Provinces seal and 1,000 Treasures Grand World. Let's begin studying then. Jianghu anticipatingly began studying the 3 superimposed seals of the 9 Provinces seal as well as the 1,000 Treasures Grand World. 3 years passed by in a flash. Jianghu eyes slowly opened up inside that cave. The 3 fusion seals within the 9 Provinces seal are much more difficult than I thought. I've been studying for 3 years, yet I've just barely fused the first 3 styles of the 9 Provinces seal. I can fundamentally display the Divine Emperor seal but not to its full potential. I'm afraid it'll take me a long time to study the remaining True Emperor seal and the Supreme seal. The 1,000 Treasures Grand World is much easier for me to comprehend on the contrary, and I've already got most of it under my control. Jianghu smiled faintly before immediately standing up. Let's go outside and try it. Jianghu then walked out of the cave and came to the vast void. He took a deep breath and waved his hand as a ray of light instantly melted into the surrounding void, followed by the world being transformed. A wonderful scroll painting world appeared out of thin air above the infinite sky. Jianghu saw the scroll painting world and grinned. Under his subconscious control soon, 1,000 Treasures Grand World, Transmigration World. Rumbling, his surroundings instantly began to transform. It was originally a barren mountain range but had become complete darkness in the blink of an eye. Huge reincarnation passages appeared out of thin air one after another inside this darkness. The reincarnation passages were scattered in every corner of the world as the endless transmigration strength spread. That was a transmigration world filled with endless transmigration strength, with Jianghu standing at the core of the transmigration world as the world's master. So, this the 1,000 Treasures Grand World. Jianghu was pleased upon seeing the changes in the surrounding world into the transmigration world before him. The transmigration world conjured from the 1,000 Treasures Grand World was completely different from a principal world. The principal world was discharged from one's own body to oppress and frighten the opponent. On the other hand, the transmigration world conjured from the 1,000 Treasures Grand World was to transform the world and its surrounding environment into a state most conducive for the user to fight. The transmigration world would be perfect for Jianghu to manipulate the transmigration law to its fullest and even exert a combat power far exceeding his own, since he had comprehended transmigration law. Such was the so-called environmental advantage. Various geographical factor advantages could determine the victor between 2 almost equal in combat strength opponents. 1,000 Treasures Grand World was able to place its user at an absolute geographical advantage. Moreover, the world conjured from 1,000 Treasures Grand World was mysterious for being able to create various changes in attacks. However, Jianghu had only gained preliminary control and could not perfectly use the 1,000 Treasures Grand World. In the future, he could try using it to create a world with both spacetime and transmigration as his control over the 1,000 Treasures Grand World becomes stronger. Perhaps, one day he could also add in the Sword World. There was no doubt that the 1,000 Treasures Grand World would be more helpful to him in the future when compared to the 9 Provinces seal. Chapter 26:18. Heaven's Edge. Jian Wushuang returned to the cave he was at earlier after getting acquainted with the Thousand Treasures grand world. He sat down cross-legged with the stately painting no longer in front of him. He had the transmigration sword formation and strange golden stone he got from the auction for a great price instead. Jian Wushuang first looked at the golden stone. What exactly is in this golden stone? Jian Wushuang held the golden stone while his soul power penetrated it to have a good look at its insides. He continued investigating for nearly half an hour before finally withdrawing his soul power. I sense space-time quivering in this golden stone. It's indeed extraordinary and probably has something within, but, is my strength still too weak at the moment? Or is my space-time law understanding too shallow? Why can't I see anything? Jian Wushuang murmured. He shook his head before deciding not to spend more time on the golden stone and turned his gaze to the transmigration sword formation. The extremely powerful transmigration sword formation was created by the sword lord Tong Xan, who was invincible among undying saints many years ago. He managed to get his hand on the transmigration sword formation's first 4 volumes after spending 40 million primordial stones on them, hence he expected to gain something useful from it. Let's take a look first. Jian Wushuang unleashed his soul power into the jade slip. His mind received a vast amount of messages in an instant as a picture concurrently appeared in his mind. There were 4 scenes in total, with each being a scene of an expert casting a type of sword formation. Jian Wushuang could see the power of those sword formations very clearly and was surprised. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes again after a while. So this is Sword Lord Tong Xin's creation. This is what made him invincible those days in the ancient god domain. The transmigration sword formation is truly powerful, with its first 4 volumes alone already extremely powerful. However, a more powerful technique also brings an equally elevated difficulty in its execution, as it demands a high understanding of the transmigration law and sword principles, said Jian Wushuang. The first 4 volumes of the transmigration sword formation. The first sword formation, Heaven's Edge. The second sword formation, All Sank. The third sword formation, Transmigration Drunk. The fourth sword formation, Frozen World. The first sword formation, Heaven's Edge, required merit achievement in the sword world and the first stage understanding of the transmigration law. Jian Wushuang's current understanding of the sword principle and transmigration was just sufficient to execute that sword formation. In other words, he could only at best attempt to perform the first sword formation. The sword formation was proven to be powerful at that. Jian Wushuang began to carefully study this first sword formation without hesitation. The transmigration sword formation was extremely profound, requiring a very high level of understanding and talent to apprehend it. The first sword formation itself was difficult for many cultivators who were good at sword principles and transmigration law. Many spent hundreds or even thousands of years but could barely apprehend it. Even Jian Wushuang had to spend 2 years in full effort and focus on doing it right to apprehend the very first sword formation. Jian Wushuang stood alone on the barren ground 2 years later. His mind power at work as a stream of light immediately appeared in front of him. The light stream was a long sword with 9 handles, with each handle filled with transmigration strength. Go! Jian Wushuang pointed a finger at the 9 long swords floating in front of him as they evolved into 9 huge reincarnation passages. Those 9 reincarnation passages were like large and mysterious black holes. Those 9 black holes charged at the void up front under Jian Wushuang's guidance with extremely great power, such that the void shuddered wherever they passed. 9 swords become 1 Heaven's Edge. Jian Wushuang commanded. Any one of those black holes could easily annihilate an Earth Ultimate God. At Jian Wushuang's command, they overlapped in an instant and formed a huge and endless reincarnation passage in which a black sword with transmigration strength shot out suddenly and violently from the passage end. The black sword instantly went through the mountain ranges in front like Heaven's Edge. The black sword disintegrated and turned into the 9 black holes once again after passing through several mountains before returning to Jian Wushuang's side. Jian Wushuang was shocked when he saw the penetrated mountains before him. Jian Wushuang exclaimed, "This is indeed powerful, as I didn't even use much strength. I should be able to easily handle any Earth Ultimate Gods, including peak Earth Ultimate Gods. Besides, I've only used 9 ordinary swords in the sword formation with some low-level earthly treasures. They aren't even powerful divine weapons and nowhere fit to perform transmigration law techniques. The power of this sword formation will skyrocket if I can get 9 identical swords that can make full use of transmigration law." Jian Wushuang held his hands together. He did not have divine weapons suitable for transmigration techniques but believed the star-picking pavilion should have them. Jian Wushuang immediately left and headed directly to the star-picking pavilion. Although he had fled after retrieving the stately painting, he remained in the Narcissus territory and was not too far from Star-Picking Pavilion. He would at most need to travel several days before arriving at the Star-Picking Pavilion. Jian Wushuang arrived at the Star-Picking Pavilion again a few days later. In a separate room within Star-Picking Pavilion? Oh, so Namwu Palace took the Huangji Golden Pill? Jian Wushuang sat on a stool while sipping tea and smiling faintly at the Star-Picking Pavilion's black chief. He appeared halfway through the battle for the Huangji Golden Pill and caused a scene, but the battle continued as soon as he left and he expected the result to be finalized on that day. Although Namwu Palace ended up having the Huangji Golden Pill, they paid a large price for it. Half of their heaven ultimate gods, about 6, were sacrificed and one of their 2 grand ultimate gods seriously injured, said the Black Chief. Did you say 6 heaven ultimate god were sacrificed? Jian Wushuang secretly smacked his tongue before asking, what about the young palace master? What happened to him? The Black Chief continued, he's all right. Although his strength isn't that great with his just average abilities, he's after all the Nanwu Palace's young palace master, the son of Nanwu Palace Master. The other top 3 powers dare not kill him. Otherwise, the Nanwu Palace Master will go crazy and break into a war against the 3 other factions. This isn't something the top factions want to see. Chapter 26:19. Infernal Crimson. Jian Wushuang nodded in agreement after hearing that. Although the top factions in Danyang Holy Realm occasionally competed against each other, things had not truly turned ugly between them. Although Nanwu Palace had sacrificed a few heaven ultimate gods in return for the Huangji Golden Pill, they were willing to accept such a fate. However, matters might be different if Nanwu Palace lost one of their grand ultimate gods or the young palace master, as that might lead to tensions between the top factions. Crimson Stone Fort would be the one reaping benefits if that happened. I'm here to buy a sword-type divine weapon that must be suitable for transmigration law, said Jian Wushuang. Master, you want it for the transmigration sword formation, right? The Black Chief peered at Jian Wushuang. You're right. It's for the transmigration sword formation, admitted Jian Wushuang. No one else knew Jian Wushuang had bagged the transmigration sword formation besides the Black Chief, as he was the one who served Jian Wushuang. He would never release the news to the public due to Star-Picking Pavilion's strict customers' privacy policy. Any Star-Picking Pavilion's chiefs arbitrarily disclosed their customers' information to the public or pulled any tricks when trading with customers would be executed once convicted, with no room for struggles or sophistry. The Black Chief said, there are several types of swords in the Star-Picking Pavilion that are suitable for the transmigration sword formation with varying strength. The most powerful one among them is the Infernal Crimson Divine Sword. Are you interested? Let me have a look, said Jian Wushuang. The Black Chief soon unsheathed a black long sword and showed it to Jian Wushuang. The black long sword was less than 3 feet long with an extremely thin and sharp blade. The blade was smooth and plain without any mysterious patterns or carvings. However, there was a bloodstained line running through the entire sword from the blade's center, which made the sword seem extremely cold and eerie. The black long sword was enshrouded in a thick transmigration strength. The Infernal Crimson Divine Sword was murderous. Good sword. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up as he could resonate with the transmigration strength carried by the Infernal Crimson Divine Sword while stroking it. He was certain that his power would be boosted if he used the sword to perform the transmigration sword technique. This sword is good, but it's only a top-tier earthly treasure. Is there something at a higher level? Jian Wushuang asked. The divine weapons usually came in different grade sets. The Black Chief explained, we do have a heavenly treasure level Infernal Crimson Divine Sword. However, you must be able to control all 9 Infernal Crimson Divine Swords at once if you're using it for the transmigration sword formation. It takes a lot of divine power to control even one heavenly treasure level divine weapon. Won't it be too taxing on you if you try to control all 9 of them at once? He placed himself in Jian Wushuang's shoes when recommending top-tier earthly treasure level Infernal Crimson Divine Sword. I have my methods regarding the divine power controls. Show me the heavenly treasure level Infernal Crimson Divine Sword, said Jian Wushuang. The Black Chief did not say much as an Infernal Crimson Divine Sword that was the same as before appeared in front of Jian Wushuang the moment he waved his hand. Although there were no changes in appearances and transmigration strength permeated on the blade's surface, the Heavenly Treasure Sword possessed a much stronger aura than its top-tier earthly treasure counterpart, giving off a much colder and fiercer aura. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up at the sight of the Infernal Crimson Divine Sword. How many primordial stones does this Infernal Crimson Divine Sword cost? Jian Wushuang asked. Master, this infernal crimson divine sword is a graded divine weapon. Although it's only an ordinary heavenly treasure divine weapon, it's the most powerful among its heavenly treasure peers, hence it's a much steeper price at 2.5 million primordial stones. You'll only need to pay 22.5 million primordial stones if you buy all 9 swords together, said the Black Chief. It's really expensive, said Jianghu Shuang. The pitch-black spear which he previously auctioned at the star-picking pavilion was a top-tier heavenly treasure offensive divine weapon, but it was only sold for 2,050,000 primordial stones, much lower than the infernal crimson divine sword. Although it's expensive, it's worth the price. Jianghu Shuang smiled and immediately took out an interspatial ring. Here you go, 22,500,000 primordial stones. Have a look. Black Chief took the interspatial ring and nodded after briefly scanning its contents. Master, wait a minute. Not long after, the Black Chief appeared in front of Jianghu Shuang again and gave all 9 heavenly treasure infernal crimson divine swords to Jianghu Shuang. Jianghu Shuang was quite happy. His combat prowess would be greatly improved with those 9 infernal crimson divine swords when performing the transmigration sword formation. The transmigration sword formation's current power was enough to wipe out a peak Earth ultimate god. Its power might even be able to compete against heaven ultimate gods if he went all out to perform the transmigration sword formation. Jianghu Shuang cried out again, there's another matter. I have a lot of primordial stones but they are of little use to me. Can I exchange these primordial stones with some divine elixir pills? Divine elixir pills? The Black Chief was startled before bitterly smiled. Master, you must be joking. It's impossible to exchange primordial stones for divine elixir pills. Impossible? Jianghu Shuang frowned. Yes, although the market value of a divine elixir pill is about 5 million primordial stones, it doesn't mean the two can be traded freely. Divine elixir pills are completely different from primordial stones after all. The divine elixir pills are for high-level cultivation, so they are far better than primordial stones. Many various factions and powerful experts regard the divine elixir pills as far more important than primordial stones. The Black Chief continued, if you'd like to exchange a divine elixir pill for primordial stones, you may get 5 million primordial stones from the star-picking pavilion, and we might even agree to the exchange for 6 million primordial stones. However, we won't be able to do the reverse. The deal will happen even if you paid 6, 7, or even 10 million primordial stones. It's not just us. I believe that many factions won't be willing to do the same. However, you may be able to use other special treasures like the Soul Offensive Divine Weapon which you have previously auctioned in exchange for divine elixir pills. Chapter 26:20, Golden Chief Yuan Lei, Heavenly Treasure Soul Offensive Divine Weapon? I was very lucky to get it, so how could I possibly get a second one? Jianghu Shuang smiled. Well, let me find a way myself if that's the case. Jianghu Shuang stood up and walked out of star-picking pavilion. Goodbye, master. The Black Chief sent Jianghu Shuang away. The Black Chief immediately went to a bald man after Jianghu Shuang left the star-picking pavilion. The bald man was the one who had some entanglements with San Shawang, one of the 3 golden chiefs in star-picking pavilion. Master, the Northern Dark Star Territorial Lord has left, reported the Black Chief in a servile tone. The bald man asked, what did he do? He bought 9 heavenly treasure infernal crimson divine swords for 22,500,000 primordial stones to perform the transmigration sword formation. In addition, he also wanted to exchange his primordial stones for divine elixir pills, but I refused, said the Black Chief. Why would an Earth ultimate god need 9 heavenly treasure infernal crimson divine swords to perform the transmigration sword formation? That's a bit too luxurious, isn't it? Well, he was lucky enough to get a heavenly treasure soul offensive divine weapon and sold it for 100 million primordial stones at the auction after all. He had also sold a heavenly treasure defensive armor at the same time and probably has a total of 120 million primordial stones. He still has a lot more to squander after deducting the 40 million he spent on the transmigration sword formation. The bald man stood up after pondering momentarily and said, I'll go out for a bit. Just find an excuse to dismiss them if other supervisors or the 2 other golden chiefs ask for me. The Black Chief was hesitant before he continued, Master, the star-picking pavilion has a strict policy against targeting our customers, no? The bald man shouted, what do you think I have in mind? There's unresolved enmity between both of us. Don't I even have the right to resolve private grievances? The Black Chief frowned but dared not continue. The bald man soon left star-picking pavilion and went toward Jianghu Shuang's direction. In the vast void, Jian Wushuang was seen in his golden robe and long sword on his back sauntering around. He was muttering under his breath, "Primordial stones are no longer useful to me now. I'll need to get my hands on some divine elixir pills if I'm planning to continue relying on refining divine power for my cultivation realm improvement. It's a pity the star-picking pavilion won't exchange it for primordial stones." Jian Wushuang was quite helpless. Although he had bought a lot of treasures, he was still left with quite a lot of primordial stones on hand. However, those primordial stones were of not much help to him at that moment. The Black Chief mentioned to him that he could use other special treasures to exchange for divine elixir pills with the star-picking pavilion, but he did not have any suitable treasures on him at the moment for such purpose. There were many treasures in his possession, with many of them being rather valuable. The stately painting went without saying. Blood Mountain sword and golden glass armor were his life divine weapon and life armor. They were extremely powerful and invaluable. The Feng Tian scroll from Crimson Stone Saint was of great help to Jian Wushuang's enlightenment and cultivation. Any one of those treasures could be used in exchange for a large number of divine elixir pills, but he would never do that. Therefore, he had to come up with an alternative solution to get some divine elixir pills. Just as Jian Wushuang thought about it, Jian Wushuang was taken aback. His soul power had been sweeping around, and that was how he discovered someone within his soul detection range. That person was emanating a particularly tyrannical aura. "Are you here for me?" Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes slightly, and the opponent sped up as expected. A stream of light appeared in front of him in just seconds. The bald man, who also wore a golden robe, slowly emerged as the stream of light dissipated. Golden robe. Jian Wushuang looked at the bald man's golden robe with his constricted eyes. This is the golden robe worn by a star-picking pavilion golden chief. He's a golden chief from the star-picking pavilion. Is he coming after me for that incident? Jian Wushuang had sort of understood the other party's intention at that moment. "You're the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord, Jian Wushuang, am I right?" The bald man stared at Jian Wushuang with a weird smile on his face. "My name is Yuan Lei, have you heard of me?" Jian Wushuang instinctively shook his head. Although Jian Wushuang knew Yuan Lei's identity and was quite sure of his intentions, he had never heard of the name Yuan Lei. "Thanks, it seems that San Shouwang had not mentioned my name to you, but you should know me nonetheless," said the bald man Yuan Lei. "That's for sure." Jian Wushuang verified his conjecture when Yuan Lei mentioned San Shouwang. San Shouwang once revealed that he had an older brother, a star-picking pavilion golden chief who always kept an eye on him. That person must be Yuan Lei. "Are you San Shouwang's older brother?" Jian Wushuang asked. "Older brother? Well, I guess so." Yuan Lei nodded. "Although I don't want to admit it, we did swear to be brothers when San Shouwang and I were only divine demons a long time ago. Unfortunately, he's not very talented. I've already achieved so much and became the star-picking pavilion golden chief while he remained as an insignificant territorial lord after so many years. Although he isn't qualified to be my brother, we were brothers nonetheless. What do you think I should do since he died in your hands?" Yuan Lei stared at Jian Wushuang with a strange smile. Jian Wushuang looked gloomy and said in a low voice, "The battle for the territorial lord position was a matter of life and death. He's weak, and that's why I'm able to kill him. Yuan Lei, you should know better, being the star-picking pavilion's golden chief. Besides, I'm a customer of the star-picking pavilion and have just left the star-picking pavilion. I'm afraid it's inappropriate for you to do so, isn't it? I'm sure you would be in hot soup if your supervisor finds out, right?" Yuan Lei sneered. I'm here for our private grievance. What will the supervisor do even if he finds out?" "Jenny, let's not talk nonsense. I'm not here to avenge San Shouwang, but he borrowed a large number of primordial stones from me to purchase the 4th volume of the Divine Destruction Beast Manual before he died. I can only ask you to pay me back on his behalf now that he's dead." Chapter 26-21. Battle against a Heaven Ultimate God. "How many primordial stones did San Shouwang borrow from you?" Jian Wushuang calmly asked. "Not much, only 30 million primordial stones, and the little love between him and me worth more or less 20 million primordial stones, so you only need to fork out 50 million primordial stones. I shall call it a truce with that, and you may continue being the Northern Darkstar Territorial Lord and do whatever you want," suggested Yuan Lei. 50 million primordial stones aren't too many," said Jian Wushuang indifferently. A weird smile appeared on Yuan Lei's face. He did have a little friendship with San Shouwang, but their relationship had faded long ago. San Shouwang did borrow some primordial stones from Yuan Lei to buy the 4th volume of the Divine Destruction Beast Manual, but it was only 6 million primordial stones, yet he had asked for 50 million, which was an exorbitant amount. He only did so because he was aware of Jian Wushuang's wealth. 50 million primordial stones was nothing to Jian Wushuang. Yuan Lei had decided that he would never trouble Jian Wushuang again if Jian Wushuang was willing to give him 50 million primordial stones. He was the Star-Picking Pavilion's golden chief and he had to comply with the Star-Picking Pavilion's policies after all. He could still avoid doing anything that goes against their policies. I have 50 million primordial stones, but what are you going to do if I won't give it to you? Jian Wushuang casually asked. No? Jenny, I advise you to think carefully about it. You ought to know your life is worth more than the 50 million primordial stone even if it's a lot. Yuan Lei smiled faintly as a huge wave of divine power was sent across aiming at Jian Wushuang at the same time. So this is a heaven ultimate god's divine power? Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly constricted. He knew the weakest of Star-Picking Pavilion's chiefs were at least a peak earth ultimate god with most of their golden chief at the heaven ultimate god realm. He knew Yuan Lei was a genuine heaven ultimate god. However, Jian Wushuang did not have the slightest fear after knowing his opponent was a heaven ultimate god. His eyes were showing a strong intent to fight. On the contrary. After spending 10 years cultivating in seclusion, I've achieved merit in Sword World and made a breakthrough to peak ultimate god realm. My combat prowess is at the peak earth ultimate god level and I'm now able to fight against a weak heaven ultimate god if I opt to put my full abilities to use. Although I've made no major breakthroughs in understanding sword principle and laws nor improvements in my cultivation realm, my strength has improved by several folds through regaining the stately painting. It's still unsure who's stronger if I try my best to fight against Yuan Lei. Jian Wushuang was looking forward to finding that out as he stared at Yuan Lei closely and licked his lips. Yuan Lei, right? I have 50 million primordial stones in my interspatial ring and also many other treasures. All of these will belong to you if you manage to kill me. This may be a huge sum of money, but can you take it from me? Jian Wushuang scoffed. Do you have a death wish? Yuan Lei's eyes went wide. If that's the case, I shall fulfill your wish. Yuan Lei instantly fired out after he said so. Boom. A majestic aura wave led by a huge gush of divine power came like a torrent. All the divine power instantly formed a green beast in front of Yuan Lei that was full of vitality. The green beast let out a roar before charging at Jian Wushuang. It continued to evolve and increased its size tenfold until it reached a few hundred feet high before it appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. The several hundred feet high green beast was like a huge mountain as it dashed toward Jian Wushuang with its mouth wide open as though it could swallow the entire world. The divine power pressed on Jian Wushuang without giving him any chance to escape. This is really powerful. You're indeed a heaven ultimate god. Jian Wushuang stood in the void and looked up to admire the green beast coming down at him. 5 years ago, he had seen the scary battle between heaven ultimate gods and grand ultimate gods during the fight of the Huangji Golden Pill. At that time he was far away from the battlefield and had not personally participated in the battlefield, hence he did not manage to grasp a feel of heaven ultimate god's power. Even though he did break into the battlefield later, all he did was threaten the people on the battlefield with his life-rating pressure without any chance to fight against the heaven ultimate gods. At this time he was all alone and could finally feel the strength of a heaven ultimate god. The green beast was just a simple trick performed by Yuan Lei at will, but its power was sufficiently strong to put any ordinary earth ultimate god in despair. An ordinary earth ultimate god, even some of the weaker peak ultimate gods, might not even have a survival chance under that green beast's mouth. However, Jian Wushuang was not included among those earth ultimate gods. He kept a cold and desolate look on his face as the 7-star secret technique within his body began brewing, whereas the aura on his body had also instantly climbed from a high-level Earth Ultimate God to the peak Earth Ultimate God level. The Blood Mountain sword behind him was instantly unsheathed and moved along with his steps. A monstrous killing intent that had been infinitely magnified rose all of a sudden. Kill, kill, kill. Jian Wushuang's entire mind and body were replaced by the murderous intent. His eyes slowly closed before reopened again. A terrifying killing intent shot out the moment his eyes opened. Spacetime sword technique, 5th style, killing heart. A scarlet sword light with murderous intent came down. The scarlet sword light carried a terrifying power which instantly cut the mountain-like green beast that was hundreds of feet tall into half. Yet the sword light remained unabated and continued cutting through the void above right into the sky. Infinite divine power breath was disseminated. Oh. Yuan Lei gave Jian Wushuang a surprised look. No wonder he's so arrogant. He's quite powerful. Humph. Jian Wushuang snorted coldly as he shot out a few streams of light using his mind. Those light streams were coming from black swords that exuded a cold breath with a large amount of transmigration strength. Those were the Infernal Crimson Divine Sword. 9 Infernal Crimson Divine Swords, 9 Heavenly Treasure Divine Weapons, arranged in a line before Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang then pointed with a finger. Bus, 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 bus. The 9 Infernal Crimson Divine Swords began to evolve into 9 reincarnation passages in the blink of an eye. Those 9 reincarnation passages were huge, mysterious, and unpredictable. Chapter 26-22, The Battle, Go. The 9 reincarnation passages went crashing at Yuan Lei like 9 gigantic asteroids under the guidance of Jian Wushuang. Each of those 9 asteroids contained immense and powerful energy. Yuan Lei shivered, and a surging pure divine power that could only be possessed by a heaven ultimate god concentrating in the void before him broke out within the blink of an eye. A barefooted green titan that was more than 3 kilometers tall formed with thick muscular arms and thighs and a single horn on its forehead. Its body surface was shrouded with terrifying divine power. The green titan swung its muscular arm as soon as it appeared and threw out a slap. Boom. The 9 asteroids were immediately deflected away. Jian Wushuang focused his eyes. 9 swords combine Heaven's Edge. Ring. The 9 asteroids were immediately deflected backward and overlapped each other before suddenly forming a huge reincarnation passage. A black divine sword shrouded with infinite samsara strength instantly shot out violently from the end of the reincarnation passage after that. The black divine sword was a perfect sword formation formed through the combination of 9 infernal crimson divine swords. The first stage of transmigration sword formation, Heaven's Edge. The first stage sword formation's power completely broke out following the full activation of Jian Wushuang's transmigration law. Virum. The black divine sword pierced through the void with terrifying power and charging boldly at the green titan like an awl. The green titan growled before tightly clenched its fist and punched violently with infinite force. Impact noises burst out violently as the two made contact and a huge hole appeared on the green titan's fist. The black divine sword continued its crazed attack and pierced through its palm before going through its chest. The momentum was finally exhausted and dispersed with the reappear of 9 identical black divine swords flying sideways in the void. The green titan should have fallen apart at that moment when being penetrated. However, it was still shrouded with surging energy. Yuan Lei was still standing there behind it with a slight smile. That's truly a sword formation created by Sword Lord Tong Xan. Such incredible power. You truly are gifted to be able to unleash the sword formation to such a level despite only learning it for a few years. Unfortunately, the distance between Earth Ultimate God and Heaven Ultimate God isn't something that could be filled in with a sword formation. The penetrated hole on the green titan not only recovered, but its energy suddenly surged even higher before vigorously projecting outwards after he said that. A green-colored lance then appeared in its right hand. Vitality Law. Jian Wushuang squinted while staring at the green titan. He could tell that Yuan Lei had studied Vitality Law as it possesses the characteristics of strong vitality, incredible resilience, and extremely firm defensive abilities. However, experts who studied Vitality Law did not possess very powerful offensive abilities. Although being offensive was not Yuan Lei's forte, he was a true Heaven Ultimate God after all. Jian Wushuang did not dare to be careless. An immense gold-colored divine power was forcefully gathered accompanied with ringing noises at that instance and formed a more than 9 kilometers tall golden god shadow behind him. The divine golden god shadow stood tall while overlooking everything around it. The green titan was only 3 kilometers tall, which was a dwarf compared to the golden god shadow in terms of size. Furthermore, Jian Wushuang's overall ability surged even higher with the help of the divine god of punishment. You do have some tricks. Shame that they're useless. Yuan Lei smiled faintly while suddenly lashing out his hand. A wholesome principal world suppressed Jian Wushuang in an instant. The principal world was filled with powerful energy, with the area that had opened up having probably surpassed 5,000 kilometers. Most importantly, the principal world had reached profound realms since he was a Heaven Ultimate God. A wave of vital energy was sweeping out at its surroundings as his principal world pressed outward. Life started bursting out in the wasteland below within a split second as large amounts of trees, flora and fauna burst out from the ground. A refreshing breeze blew by as the environment between heaven and earth turned into a completely lively new realm. The green titan's size immensely augmented as its power grew to a whole new level and it began to charge at Jian Wushuang with the lance in its hand. However, Jian Wushuang sneered at the scene before him. Right then, boom! A heaven-shaking sword essence suddenly surged as the 50,000 kilometers sword world he developed was unleashed. Although it was only a merit sword world, It ruthlessly swept out as soon as it appeared, and the profound realm principal world retreated swiftly like an ebbing tide under the sword world's influence. What? Yuan Lei was shocked. A merit sword world could actually suppress my profound principal world? How's that possible? Yuan Lei was completely stunned but did not know that the heaven ultimate god, Zhonghun, that Jian Wushuang had killed was equally as stunned as he was. Furthermore, that surprise was only the beginning as Jian Wushuang waved his arm right after that and a beam of light blended into the surrounding void. Heaven and earth were shivering in that instance. A most beautiful scroll-painting world appeared out of nowhere from the heaven above. The scroll-painting world was incredibly real with mountains, rivers, and even contained 9 gigantic continents. What's that? Yuan Lei frowned. The Thousand Treasures Grand World, Transmigration World. Jian Wushuang's cold voice resonated. Vroom, the surroundings began to change. The original wasteland initially became full of life with birds chirping and flowers blooming from Yuan Lei's unleashed vitality law power. However, that environment had turned into infinite darkness in the blink of an eye. Gigantic reincarnation passages began to appear one by one out of nowhere in the darkness. The reincarnation passages were spread out to different corners of the world as infinite samsara strength began to unscrupulously spread out. The transmigration world was filled with infinite samsara strength as Jian Wushuang stood in the center, although he was the ruler of the transmigration world. Yuan Lei, welcome to my world. Jian Wushuang smiled as his laughter resonated in every corner of the transmigration world. Ring, 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 ring. The 9 separated infernal crimson divine sword appeared before Jian Wushuang once again, trembling and shrouded with samsara strength, way stronger than before. Chapter 26-23. World Transformation. Transmigration world was mainly powered by transmigration law, which was filled with inexhaustible transmigration powers within. Samsara strength activation or usage of transmigration-related secret techniques in that world would have their strength greatly empowered. However, tactics from other laws would be weakened considerably in that world. The effect of Jian Wushuang's transmigration sword formation could be maximized there. On the other hand, Yuan Lei had his vitality law limited in every way. Yuan Lei, welcome to my world. Jian Wushuang's laughter pounded on Yuan Lei's eardrums as he felt a touch of annoyance. World transformation. This kid could actually do that in an instant? How mind-blowing is that formation? Yuan Lei was feeling a little shocked but quickly firmed up his stare. No, he's a mere earth ultimate god regardless of how skilled this kid is. Grand techniques such as world transformation are perhaps unachievable even by undying saints, let alone him. He must be relying on some treasure. Yes, it has to be a treasure. A treasure that enables world transformation. The treasure would be mine if I killed him. Killing intent rose in Yuan Lei's mind. He originally did not have such strong killing intent toward Jian Wushuang, as he only wanted Jian Wushuang to pay him 50 million primordial stones and he would immediately leave. However, forget about 50 million at that moment. He would definitely not allow Jian Wushuang to walk away alive even if he agreed to pay him 100 million primordial stones. Boom. The 3 kilometers tall Green Titan's hostility shot up into the heavens. It already appeared before Jian Wushuang and attacked furiously with the lance in its hands. Umph. Jian Wushuang let out a cold humph as the 9 infernal crimson divine swords floating before him once again overlapped each other and again formed the first stage of transmigration sword formation, Heaven's Edge. The sword formation's energy level increased drastically and shot out with a boom under the empowerment from the surrounding infinite samsara strength. Bang, 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 bang. One violent bang after another resonated as the transmigration sword formation repeatedly clashed head-on with the Green Titan's lance. Although the Black Divine Sword was fended off every time and even flying off, the Green Titan did not have it easy either, with its advancement completely blocked. Moreover, the Black Divine Sword was incredibly agile. It could completely turn into an overpowering sword formation, but it could also disassemble into 9 different swords while still being able to unleash incomparable energy. For instance, the sword formation found a chance to disassemble at that moment. 6 infernal crimson divine swords continued clashing with the Green Titan while the other 3 were attacking Yuan Lei like lightning under the empowerment of the surrounding samsara strength. The grim-looking Yuan Lei spontaneously executed a palm strike which deflected those 3 infernal crimson divine swords and caused them to fly backward. In a not-so-distant void, Jian Wushuang's eyes were burning with a heaven-shaking battle intent in the center of the transmigration world at that moment. Heaven Ultimate God. I'd love to see if I have the abilities to slay a Heaven Ultimate God. Jian Wushuang moved with a bloodthirsty smile. The heaven and earth around transformed once again as he moved. Although the surrounding was still pitch black, the various reincarnation passages had already vanished out of sight. A large number of spacetime cracks and immense spacetime storms took over its place. The samsara strength that initially filled the area between heaven and earth had changed into surging spacetime energy. The Thousand Treasures Grand World had shifted from Transmigration World into Spacetime World in the blink of an eye. That world was dominated by spacetime. Heaven and earth have changed again? Yuan Lei's face was grim as Jian Wushuang concurrently appeared before him under his scrutiny. Ring. A total of 300 apparitions burst out at the same time and filled the space. They were faster and more agile under the effect of spacetime energy. Even Yuan Lei could not tell which among the apparitions was Jian Wushuang's true self in such a short time. Whoosh! A cold sword light suddenly appeared and cunningly directed itself at Yuan Lei's heart from behind. That's really fast. Yuan Lei was shocked. In truth, Jian Wushuang could not perform at such incredible speed with his current understanding of spacetime law. The speed was mainly due to him situated at the spacetime world within the Thousand Treasures Grand World. His performance using spacetime law was greatly amplified there. Boom. A low-impact noise resonated which shuddered Yuan Lei, who swiftly and subconsciously moved sideways. However, Jian Wushuang instantly dashed forward and completely unleashed his sword technique with a terrifying speed. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Shades of sword shadows lashed out from Jian Wushuang's hand. The sword shadows looked very spontaneous, hence its momentum was not considered strong. However, they were moving too fast. Too fast. They were just too fast. Jian Wushuang already possesses very fast speeds. The spacetime world's assistance only immensely further increased his attack speed, which resulted in his sword lights moving incredibly fast despite being a spontaneous attack. The inexhaustible sword shadows were like an infinite ocean of swords that shrouded Yuan Lei within and forced him to defend himself the best he could. Despite being able to defend himself, he began to lose gradually from exhaustion. Kid, don't be too cocky now. Yuan Lei was incredibly mad and finally unleashed his Heaven Ultimate God abilities. Layers and layers of vital strength shrouded his body as his divine body also began to surge violently before growing to 5 meters tall with a great deal of energy increase. Energy began to gather in his right hand as he unleashed a palm strike. Boom boom. Heaven and earth shivered as a gigantic hand suddenly appeared. That gigantic hand emitted such energy levels that it would make any regular Earth Ultimate God lose all hopes to live. Even Jian Wushuang could not help but squint. It was not long from when he first managed to control the Thousand Treasures Grand World, hence the spacetime world he manifested from within was not too sturdy. The surrounding spacetime world began to tremble upon the appearance of the gigantic hand. The gigantic hand's complete energy outburst shattered the spacetime world and caused Jian Wushuang to retreat at that instant. Heaven Ultimate Gods are truly marvelous. However, Jian Wushuang sneered as the shattered spacetime world began to rebuild itself at an incredible speed. The world began to shift once again. The shrouding darkness and spacetime storms had faded away, revealing Jian Wushuang and Yuan Lei on a bare wasteland with many swords plunged to the ground. There were long swords, soft swords, heavy swords, and various other sword types. However, each of the swords undoubtedly had a terrifying aura. 10 of thousands of swords were plunged standing from the ground on that wide wasteland. It was a huge-scale sword grave. Thousand Treasures Grand World, Sword Principal World. Chapter 26-24. The Strongest Battle Power. It was the Transmigration World first, then Spacetime World, and now it has shifted into the Sword Principal World? Yuan Lei did not like that a single bit. Beams of vigorous sword essence filled every corner of that world upon the Sword Principal World's formation. Jian Wushuang had been using his 50,000 kilometers perfect sword world to violently suppress and stun Yuan Lei, which caused his principal world to barely hang in there. Jian Wushuang's sword world energy suddenly surged ferociously once again upon the shift into Sword Principal World and crushed Yuan Lei's principal world in just a short moment. An incredibly powerful stunning strength took effect on Yuan Lei's body. Damn! Yuan Lei could not help but curse. Jian Wushuang attacked once again at that moment. The Blood Mountain sword lashed out silently. The heaven, earth, and space-time seemed as though they were overlapping. A mysterious sword shadow flashed by and disappeared under such overlappings. Spacetime Sword Technique's 6th form, Overlapping Shadow. With the support of the surrounding Sword Principal World, Jian Wushuang's strike was especially terrifying. Yuan Lei was completely under the sword world's stunning effects as his face turned red from seeing the sword being pointed at him, and the 3 kilometers tall green titan immediately stood before him. Slash. The cold sharp sword blade sliced through the green titan and cut it into two halves before the sword shadow's impressive momentum continued to sweep toward Yuan Lei's divine body. Although Yuan Lei's divine body was equipped with protective techniques, his body was still shaken violently under the sword shadow attacks and threw up a big gulp of blood in the next moment. He was injured. A respectable heaven ultimate god expert like Yuan Lei was severely injured. Boy, you've totally pissed me off. I want to strip off your skin and take your bones apart to vent my hatred today. Yuan Lei's eyes turned red as he released a deep growl filled with infinite killing intent like a demon from hell. Jian Wushuang sneered upon seeing that. What coincidence. I'm also losing interest in playing games with you. Let's have a duel of fates. Jian Wushuang's body surface burst with golden light as soon as he finished his words. The golden light which came from his golden robe was the golden glass armor. A layer of golden armor appeared on the surface of his body in only a swift moment. One of the top 5 7 stars Black Sect's secret technique, 9 Sparkle Star Armor was unleashed. His current achievement of the 9 Sparkle Star Armor from the Golden Armor chapter was enough to increase Jian Wushuang's overall ability threefold. Freeze! Jian Wushuang quietly commanded and the 9 Infernal Crimson Divine Swords once again overlapped each other in the void next to him before forming the first stage of Transmigration Sword formation. At the same time, a wave of golden divine power swept out from Jian Wushuang's body and formed a grand golden divine power ocean that swept across every direction in a frenzy, covering the surrounding heaven and earth. A gigantic golden prison appeared in the Sword Principal world in the blink of an eye. The golden prison's appearance perfectly overlapped with the Sword Principal world as its realm suppression effects began to sweep outward. The 9 kilometers tall golden god shadow behind Jian Wushuang also had its aura rise to its peak. Its eyes were shining with a thick essence of light while standing still. 7 stars secret technique, divine god of punishment and 9 sparkle star armor. I've unleashed all 3 of 7 star sect's strongest secret techniques. I've also used the stately paintings 1000 treasures grand world and prison of punishment. Presently I've shown all my cards except for the life rating suppression. This is the highest state I can reach for the moment and also my most powerful form. I feel that the current me is even qualified to destroy a regular heaven ultimate god. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists as his burning battle intent surged. Umph. Yuan Lei humped coldly as his body that had already grown to 5 meters tall grew dramatically again and became 10 meters tall. At the same time, various secret markings which looked like tree branches surfaced on his body and gradually crawled all over his body, making him look ever so ferocious and terrifying. A gigantic tree grew upward behind him. That gigantic tree was also 3 kilometers tall, incomparably sturdy and full of life. A layer of green armor also appeared on the green titan's body in front of Yuan Lei along with its sudden violently surging energy. Charge! Yuan Lei shouted a command and the green titan charged at Jian Wushuang fiercely with a jump that covered a long distance in a short moment. Go! The black divine sword manifested from Transmigration Sword formation vibrated upon being pointed by Jian Wushuang. Its energy suddenly increased threefold before charging outward in the blink of an eye under the 9 Sparkle Star Armor's influence. Jian Wushuang's deadly eyes stared ahead at Yuan Lei who was at a far distance. The 9 kilometers tall golden god shadow suddenly burst with glorious golden light behind him. The gigantic golden god shadow's arms swung outwards upon Jian Wushuang's mental manipulation. The 2 golden palms suddenly expanded infinitely to the extent of covering the sky and the sun, such that half of heaven and earth could be covered with only one hand. The entire surrounding void was then covered by both hands. Both palms began to fold together toward Yuan Lei. Punishment, divine destruction. Jian Wushuang commanded vigorously. The terrifying divine power burst out of the golden god shadow's giant palms. Yuan Lei was completely imprisoned within the void as the 2 palms slowly folded together. Divine destruction, like prison of punishment, was one of the techniques built within the divine god of punishment secret technique. In his past life, Jian Wushuang had seen Emperor by using that move before. In his current life he could finally use it after making a breakthrough to peak ultimate god along with a few years of studying. Even though they were the same moves, it was a few times more powerful than Emperor Bai's when Jian Wushuang performed it. Yuan Lei began to panic upon seeing both golden palms closing in on him from both sides. He could feel the extremely destructive energy contained in the 2 palms and dared not be careless. Boom boom boom. Infinite green divine power suddenly burst out from his body and caused the gigantic tree behind him to begin spreading out. The countless branches started to take shape and extend before finally clashing head-on with the two golden palms. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The divine power clashing noises resonated the heaven and earth. However, the head-on clash only lasted for a short moment before the two gigantic golden palms began folding together again. What? Yuan was completely shocked and had not expected that he still could not fend off that particular attack after unleashing his most powerful ability. The two golden palms were still closing in and continued to suppress him while the branches which burst out from his body were also gradually losing the fight. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.